last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a washing student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would have made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind to chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Best to place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered one of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me.
Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. SWAT team took your neighbor today. Watched them as they walked him away. You told yourself extremists come in all different shapes. Met his eyes and lowered your gaze. Is it too late for us to ever change? When we are collecting the dust of better days, they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to be safe, not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Sheriff stopped your daughter today. Pepper sprayed her twice in the face. He must have had good reason if he'd treat her that way. At least that's what they've taught you to say. But is it too late for us to ever change? Once we're collecting the dust of better days, and they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to feel safe, not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Feds arrived and had you detained. Said you'd made some posts they want changed. Tased you till you felt like you'd forgotten your name, or life before they had you contained. Oh, life before they had you contained. SWAT team took your neighbor today.
are these people?
Who are these people? What's up, everybody? Okay. Oh, see, I have to fix this. Hi, everyone. It's Indy, and it's Tuesday night, so it's Indie News Now Live, because we do this every Tuesday night. Yes, literally, you're somebody now. You get, I mean, you get by. You've been around long enough. You're not going to mess around, and you'll clear out the riffraff, which is what I appreciate. Mod privileges for literally. Okay, so this is Indie News Now Live. I've got a massive show. Now, I'm going to do something a little different tonight. Normally, I bring a lot of articles and kind of what happened and facts and not much speculation. Tonight is going to be a little different. I'm going to do a lot of speculating. You can't even find INN's show on Rumble. That's terrible. That's terrible, Steve Gill. It's there. Rumble.com/C/Indie News Network. It's there. We're live. I'll drop the link right here in all the chats so that anyone that wants to go to Rumble and watch it can, across everywhere. All right. Yeah, because we're live everywhere, and we're on INN. We're on, damn it, rookie move. I did not turn on Substack. See, I love reminding myself that we're on every platform, because then I have to turn on every platform. Okay. We're going to start over again. So, we're going to be doing some speculating tonight, where I usually read articles and I bring other people's ideas and kind of piggyback on that. I'm going to kind of do that, but I'm going to use it to assemble my own story tonight. And I'm going to tell a story a little bit that I don't think anybody else is seeing or telling or talking about. And maybe you'll think I'm crazy, and maybe I'm not, but we're going to have some fun doing it. First thing is that we're going to talk about the Lakers. I don't talk about sports really, but this is a little different. This intersects sports and politics and business and venture capital and technocracy and oligarchy and gangsterism, and like a bunch of things all intersect here. So I want to talk about that. And of course, Israel is not far in the background, right? And then we're going to talk about the government expanding its own powers, both in approving Trump's attorney general, what's his name? Todd Blanche. And then he expanded presidential powers. We're going to talk about that. More anti-flock TikTok and Instagram accounts are being monitored now by government. That's not cool. And then I called an audible, and I'm reading the lineup last night. I'm talking to Reef, and I'm like, I feel like something's missing. And right as I'm about to go to bed, I'm like, oh my God, Luigi. I didn't even put in anything about Luigi. Oh my God. All right. Well, we're going to talk a lot about Luigi. And then all of a sudden it went from, this is going to be a 3-hour show tonight. I'm warning you. Buckle up, strap in. It's going to be a long one tonight. And I do have a long fuck Israel that's also a little depressing. And then after that, I got a lightning round. Like, I got even more than that. And then we'll do the GoFundMes and get out of here. It's going to be a long one tonight. So again, buckle up. Support independent media. Thank you to Mikhail last week for joining the Wall of Fame. Golden Monarchs jumped up there lately. Really appreciate everybody stepping up. This has been awesome. Longer than last week. Yes, Kameshwari Kate, I'm guessing it's going to be longer than last week. Okay. That immediately popped up on your feed. Good. I'm glad to see that. All right. So, yeah, we're going to have a long one tonight, because I have 5 big stories plus the GoFundMes. So, yeah, we're going to be here a while. And it's going to be fun. We're going to have some fun. So, again, I'm going to start with something I don't normally talk about. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Let me go back here, because I didn't even say Cash App $ Indie News Network. ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com. We're live there, and you can tip the network there. That's self-hosted. It's WordPress. Actually added a bunch of new sources to Indie News Now this week. People that I like their Substacks. Professor David Miller, Tracking Power is now going there. Several others as well. INNnewsletter.com. That's for the network, for Indie News Network. And IndieMediaToday.com. That's my Substack. Clips for this show go there in the morning, ad-free, before they ever go anywhere else. So that's one reason to subscribe there. It gets emailed to your inbox or delivered right to the Substack app. Okay. Now we're going to get to our first segment, which is about the Los Angeles Lakers. And I don't even care about sports, pro sports anymore, or college sports for that matter. Normally. This, I will say I've been getting more back into it a little bit lately, but this sale and this drama has piqued my interest because there are a lot of things at play here that intersect with all the things we talk about. So I don't know how many people even know who this guy is right here. And everybody knows who this guy is. This is the guy who owned the Lakers and bought the Lakers 10 months ago. His name is Mark Walter. All right. So Mark Walter, out of nowhere, quote unquote, decided last week to sell the Los Angeles Lakers, his controlling 80% stake from the group that he owns. And he's selling that to this guy. He's related to the president's son-in-law. That's Josh Kushner, Jared Kushner's brother. So we're going to get into Josh Kushner. So what the hell's going on here? Okay. So let's start there. The Los Angeles Lakers are being sold to American businessman Josh Kushner. That's great. That is kind. And Bob Iger for a record-breaking price of over $12 billion. Okay, multiple sources told ESPN. Now, what's funny is this is reported by Ramona Shelburne from ESPN. She's a senior writer. Bob Iger was her boss until about 5 months ago, for years. All right. And she's basically reporting this story about her ex-boss and American businessman. No relation to the president or to Jared Kushner. Kushner and Iger were involved in the expansion process in Las Vegas. I'm going to get to that. But in a stunning turn, they pivoted to make an aggressive offer to buy the Lakers from Mark Walter, who purchased a controlling interest in the team from the Buss family last year. This is really interesting. So there's a lot to unpack right there. So he bought the controlling interest, which again was like 80% of the team. They held on to about 20%, the family. And allegedly, these guys were involved in one of 6 groups that were in the bidding to get a franchise potentially in Las Vegas. So we're going to talk about NBA expansion. So before we get to that, let's start with this lady, Betsy. This is certainly a shocking development. So Trump's DOJ and Trump's SEC are investigating brand new Lakers owner Mark Walter and Guggenheim Partners, right? For some fraud thing and insurance thing and being over leveraged. Financial crimes. And now suddenly Walter is selling the Lakers to Trump's family member? I mean, loosely, but it's Kushner's family member, his brother. All right. And surely Trump doesn't have a reputation of using his political power for political gain or his family's gain. This is surely completely above board, right? Surely it's got to be a coincidence, right? Jared's BFF, by the way, was the head of the SEC, like until last week. The SEC started investigating Mark Walter. But we missed something in between. Mark Walter suddenly agrees to sell the Lakers to Kushner's family. Nothing to see here. Please disperse. All right, I got one more. Now, I don't... Oh, let me stop this.
Kushner's buying...
Stop, dude. I don't normally bring this guy. I don't normally like this guy. But this guy got the story right, got it up quick, and he said exactly what I was going to say about this. So I'm going to bring James Lee's take. All right. Again, I don't normally put James Lee up, but I'm going to do it here. It's 1:25. So let's start with what he has to say.
How is this not just straight corruption? The Kushners buying the Lakers for $12.5 billion. Because check this out, the current owner of the Lakers, Mark Walter, who also co-owns the Dodgers, just bought the team last year, so why would he sell? Well, it turns out Mark is in a little bit of hot water, facing a $16 billion federal investigation for alleged financial fraud and bribery. But then just 3 weeks ago, Mark Walter was in the White House with Trump at the Rose Garden, where he presented him with a championship ring. And now his marquee NBA team has been sold to someone in the Trump family, specifically Joshua Kushner, who is Jared Kushner's brother. Jared, of course, is Ivanka's honeypot husband, Donald Trump's daughter. Of course, everybody in here is tied to Peter Thiel for some reason. Anyway, ESPN reported that the businessmen were involved in the expansion process in Las Vegas, but in a quote-unquote stunning turn, they pivoted to making an aggressive offer to buy the Lakers from Mark Walter. Gee, I wonder who opened that door. By the way, I would not be shocked if the next move was Trump forcing the SEC to drop the case against Mark Walter, just like he did when he pardoned Charles Kushner, who is Jared and Joshua's dad, for tax evasion and, get this, trying to blackmail his brother-in-law by hiring a prostitute to sleep with him and then videotaping it.
Just another one of those wonderful stories of the golden age.
Yeah. That last one was kind of crazy. You know, hiring, I don't know about that story. That's, again, James Lee. But yeah, so there's also word that Mark Walter was in the Oval Office 3 weeks ago meeting with Trump. So basically, they either worked this out or there was some kind of threat or offer or something was discussed. And now you see the fallout and the results of that. So my speculation right away, underneath Bill Simmons, who said, really, there's something else going on in the NBA that nobody's talking about really in our space, is this Clippers scandal. How they basically got to pay Kawhi Leonard and their sponsors were giving him all kinds of perks that are illegal as compensation from the league. And there's like, the league is coming down on them and it's a big deal. All right. Bill Simmons is saying that the Clipper story is 1/1000th as interesting as this Walter thing. All right. But not if your disasters are seeing the big picture. So this guy, I don't know, the driving factor behind the Walter story could end up crashing the whole economy. Maybe, but what they're talking about here is that he's over leveraged with his insurance and he could default, and that could hurt his insurance company and to the tune of billions of dollars. All right. But my feeling is that it was ordered by Trump, would be my guess, to make the indictments disappear, and Jared Kushner's brother somehow gets involved in the sale. That's shady as fuck. Gangster style hold up, in my opinion. The economy won't be affected by this. This is mafia tactics to strong arm sports franchises. All right. Because Thrive Capital has a sports franchise arm, and we're going to talk about Thrive Capital in a second. Sorry, because I did some digging into Josh Kushner and his organization. So somebody says, does this mean that Mark Walter is in actual trouble? Well, no. Mark Walter paid his tribute to Trump with this sale. The investigation will be dropped in a month, guaranteed. Again, gangster style tactics. I don't know what happened to the thing. I had a De Niro or a thing held up here. I don't know where it went. So on top of that, it came out, I think today or yesterday, a story that was yesterday, that the Buss family was going to sell all of its ownership stake and completely divest in the team now that Kushner and Iger are involved. And again, Iger ran Disney, ABC Disney, which is interestingly suing the Trump administration right now. A lot of back and forth going on here. And there's a lot to pay attention to, which is why I wanted to bring this. All right. Buss family decided to sell, allegedly, according to Bleacher Report, the remaining 17.8%. Now, they got $10 billion for the other 80%. How much are they going to get for this 20, considering that the other 80 now is valued at 12.5? They'll probably get that kind of market value. They'll get another $3-4 billion. Ridiculous money that nobody will ever in their lifetimes be able to spend. But that's the asset that appreciated over 47 years of her father owning the team and the family inheriting it once he died. This is what they get. There'll be massive tax implications unless the thing was put into all kinds of trusts. And according to the community note, the Bus family has reportedly voted to sell. Okay. But Jeannie Buss's attorney said that the vote's invalid and the sale requires her approval as a co-trustee. And I don't know if that's really the case or not. Now, this person speculates, and here's my first speculation with them, that the Saudi crown prince is now the majority shareholder in America's greatest basketball franchise via Kushner Family Enterprises as the proxy. Prove me wrong. And I kind of agree. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with that. They've done a lot of dealings with the Saudi royal family. Thrive Capital is a pretty big venture capital fund, and I believe they do some business with the Saudi royal family. I know that Jared's thing just bought EA, Electronic Arts, and took it private in a $55 billion acquisition, partnered with the Saudi royal family just like 2 weeks ago. So, oh, here we go. Here's the deal negotiator, right? So that's Jimmy from Goodfellas. There's your negotiator. I think this was gangster tactics. I think they strong-armed this guy into saying, you want to make this investigation disappear? Sell us this, sell off your piece in Chelsea, you get to keep the Dodgers, and good luck with the insurance companies. And the federal investigations at least will be off your back. And Mark Walter allegedly, if you look into it, was partners and friendly with what's his name? With Gavin Newsom, of all people, believe it or not. So yeah, Gavin Hansen. So next, I have this guy, Neil. Now here's where we get into Thrive Capital and Josh Kushner and all the moves that have been made recently by this guy. So don't leave out the little Kushner brother. All right. Great story of how you can start your career with billions in outside investment from a young age. You don't always need bootstraps. A connected family can crown you a genius with unlimited funds and connections right away. Also, the American way. Sure. So this guy said that Bob Iger is a legend, right? SMB attorney. 1 hour before the Pixar deal was set to close, Steve Jobs pulled Iger aside, told him that the cancer had returned. Only Jobs' wife and the doctors knew. He gave Iger a clean out of the deal. Iger stayed the course. Years later, he handpicked his own successor at Disney, Bob Chapek, let him take the fall for pandemic-era struggles, then systematically cut his legs out and took the job back. Same dude. Now he gets a piece of the Lakers, which is like one of his dreams, always to own a NBA franchise. So, let's get into Josh. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that FIFA was going to create a private fund for hedge fund investors. And guess who led it? It was this guy. Now, there was such a backlash in the global world from this announcement that they ended up backing off of this 2 days later. All right. But here, this center goal said that FIFA had planned a $20 billion commercial entity with Kushner's Thrive Capital as the lead investor. So again, there's that Thrive Capital. All right. This is now turning into like another Peter Thiel. All this money, tens and 20 billions of dollars are being put into this organization in order to be able to purchase massive assets. Who's doing this? Through this guy as a front. Well, he doesn't really have to disclose that anymore. This isn't baseball, actually, Fred. This is technically the NBA. This is basketball. But it also involves baseball in this case because Kushner also owns a stake in the San Francisco Giants. He has a stake in the Miami Heat. I think I saw he had a stake in another NBA team as well, which is weird. How can you own multiple NBA teams? I guess if you're a minority that doesn't have a controlling interest and a say. It's weird. So that's Jared's brother with regard to FIFA that crashed, but he's making massive moves with, again, tens of billions of dollars. This guy's in his 30s. How is he connected to all that money? Well, it's his brother and his father, his brother's father-in-law, president, but also, oh yeah, that's right. Thrive Capital and Andreessen Horowitz to lead a $4 billion round of Anduril, raising money at a $60 billion valuation this March. So, again, we're $4 billion raised with Andreessen Horowitz. That's a lot of money, right? And that's coming out at exact sum. And then on top of that, this is all this year. And here's 7C's unpacking this a year ago. All right, all the different organizations and entities that Thrive Capital is connected to. And so you can go back and, oh yeah, Neuralink too. They're invested in Neuralink. Great. It doesn't get any better, because then on top of that, he also owns a piece of OpenAI, one of their largest investors. The Lakers are about to get coached by ChatGPT 6 Phil Jackson. Okay. Now, this is all really interesting. Now, I also mentioned that they were in the bidding to purchase a franchise in Las Vegas from the NBA, or buy in for the rights to own this franchise. Now, this is where I'm really going to start speculating, and people are going to tell me I'm nuts. And this is because of the Israel stuff. But the franchise fee for a new franchise. Now, what they're talking about is that they're going to add 2 franchises to the NBA. They're going to add one in Seattle. They're exploring to put a team back that, like, to replace the Sonics, and Vegas. And there's a bunch of groups that have lined up to throw money at the league in order to get this franchise. What I see happening here, honestly, is something a little bit different. Now, they now know that the franchise tag is $8 billion. Whether they go to Vegas or they go to another city, they're going to get $8 billion as an entry fee from a new franchise that's coming into the league. Now, my feeling is that a year and a half ago, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but Mark Cuban sold the Dallas Mavericks. So let's just get into, so these are the franchises. These are the groups that are looking to get into the franchise. This was from July 20th, not even a month ago. All right, that there were 6 groups, all right, said to be in the $8 to $10 billion range. This is from Yahoo Sports. I don't like to bring corporate media stuff. Here are the front runners. So you've got the people that own the Golden Knights and a minority investor in the T-Mobile Arena. Then you had Josh and Bob Iger in that group. Now they're out, obviously. So you have all these people that still could potentially end up with a franchise, either in Las Vegas or somewhere else. That's right, Angel. That's what I'm going to get to in a minute. Thank you. That Miriam Adelson did buy the Mavericks recently from Mark Cuban, who claims he regrets selling the Mavericks to the Adelson family. Maybe because of their closeness with the Trump family, and he's like a TDS kind of shitlib to a point, but he's also a billionaire. So he sees what's going on. Magic Johnson, by the way, is also involved potentially in the ownership group, one of the groups that's bidding on this. Right. So the 2 front runners were the Las Vegas Jacks group and the Kushner-Iger group, again, which is now out. Same report also suggested that Foley could end up coming on board with one of those groups. Building an arena in Vegas is one of the league's top priorities. So there's no arena in Vegas right now. So here's my thought process is, again, and I responded to Mark Goodwin from Unlimited Hangout. Go follow, Mark on Twitter, ex-Bitcoin magazine, but now he's reformed about Bitcoin and realizes it's a grift. He is a massive Celtics fan, and he's been saying, so based. Okay. because he's joking because he wants to see the Lakers run into the ground as a Celtics fan. And he says, Kushner, I said, I'm guessing that they're letting Miriam move the Mavs to Vegas. No expansion team. Not that there's no expansion team, but actually that there's going to be, after I thought about it more, there'll be an expansion team, but they'll most likely get to move to Dallas. There's been a lot of talk with Dallas and an arena, and they just made a deal with the group that owns the Stars, the hockey team in Dallas, about this. So Kushner's owning the ultra valuable assets like EA Sports and the Lakers is anything but based. I hope you're joking. And he was. All right. And then there was this one, and this is why I think they're potentially moving to Vegas, is that you have this Patrick Dumont, that's Miriam Adelson's son-in-law that runs the team, last February started to shoot down rumors when they traded Luka to the Lakers, by the way. Interesting, that connection. All right, the Mavericks are not moving to Vegas. That's an emphatic, that was really interesting, all right? So the lady doth protest too much, maybe? All right, so the next thing that happened is that the Stars are claiming that the Mavericks in November listed team headquarters as Las Vegas. Why? Because Miriam Adelson, their principal property is Las Vegas Sands, and Las Vegas Sands is headquartered in Las Vegas. They don't own any casinos, but they own casinos overseas, but not in Las Vegas. But her being headquartered there apparently was in some kind of violation of the franchise agreement with the city of Dallas. So maybe they had to move it back. My point is that they seem to be indicating that they would like to and have an intent to try to move their franchise to Vegas rather than allowing one to start up there. And there's a bunch of reasons why they might want to do that. Most of all, that Vegas would not necessarily put up with a losing expansion franchise for very long, that it takes a long time in the NBA to build out a franchise. The last two that joined the league, the Toronto Raptors and Grizzlies, I don't think either one has still won a championship yet. So if Vegas wants to have a chance to really compete, then they may want to bring in an established franchise for the league and let that other team grow and develop in Dallas, which has supported a losing team for 40 years. That's my rationale over there. All right. Now, so they list Vegas as their headquarters. All right. But then literally yesterday, as I'm researching all of this, it's announced that they came to a deal and that the lawsuit's been dropped and that there's now an arena deal to stay in the city of Dallas for the next 5 years. The Adelsons actually bought a property that houses the old Cowboy Stadium and had plans to knock that down and build an arena out there for the Mavericks starting in 2030. They could still do that for another team. There's nothing stopping them doing that for a brand new franchise. Brand new franchise, brand new arena, brand new name, brand new energy, brand new everything. Adelson could sell the property. Adelson could keep the property, develop whatever she wants to do. Right? There's a lot here, I feel like. And I feel like a lot of people aren't seeing the big picture of Adelson trying to move this thing to Dallas. And that's because of the Israel connection. Trump forcing the sale of the Lakers, all right? You think Trump won't bring the NBA commissioner in and say, these guys are moving the Mavericks to Vegas, and now your new franchise is going to Dallas. And Trump's going to try to orchestrate that. And maybe Jared will even get a piece of the new one. Who knows? There's so much corruption going on, all right? And yes, that's correct. The Mavs just extended their lease, all right? But that's meaningless because if the Mavs want to move, they'll move. Exactly, all right? Or whoever the new franchise is will come in while the new arena is being built over the next 5 years. They'll need a place to play anyway, right? They'll just take over that lease. There's there's really, like, I see it being a jigsaw puzzle type of fit that they're going to try to potentially orchestrate. I don't know if it's going to work, but I think that there are going to be mechanisms behind the scenes to try to manipulate that for the Adelson family because of how much she's invested in Trump. I mean, that just seems like an obvious thing to me that she would turn to him and ask or demand or, you know, look, the West Bank, thanks for the West Bank thing. This is what I need for me. That was for Netanyahu and for Israel. But now for me personally, I want to move my franchise that I just bought and then sold off their biggest asset, which was weird. A lot of people feel like she sold it to, she did the league a favor in order for them to potentially allow for her to move the franchise. So she'll turn to the league and say, look, I gave a primo asset to the premium franchise that raised its value by $2.5 billion throughout this season. Right? So it's pretty interesting. Again, I apologize for all the sports talk. I know pro sports and this kind of money. Yes, Luka Doncic. That's right. And thank you for indulging me a little bit. Again, this was a little bit of a fun story, but also a gangsterism story, a shakedown kind of story, a massive business dealing kind of story, and a venture capital story. Because how many other individuals or, you know, who else has the money to spend $12.5 billion to buy a sports franchise? Private equity. And private equity has gotten involved in buying a piece of the New York Yankees, very small, non-controlling interest, in order to free up some of the Steinbrenner's money and get the kids that are now in their like 60s, their hands on some of the cash that this franchise is actually worth. They're doing just fine. And believe me, they're not poor, but that franchise is worth even more in my mind than the LA Lakers. They also just made a deal on the network thing. The Yes Network was the first regional sports network that any franchise tried to start on their own, and it was wildly successful. And yes, Angel's talked about this quite a bit on both Angel and Friends and on the Ocho when he does both his baseball and his basketball coverage. So definitely go check out Angel's shows on INN. He's got a lot to say about sports as well. All right. Well, that was a little fun. All right. Support independent media. Again, we need it more than ever. Thank you for that. These are the people up there. Again, appreciate Mikhail, Nihilo, and Ostrom for joining the Wall of Fame this week. All those people are awesome and have already supported the network financially. And if you can, I appreciate and I understand that. You could just share the stream to your social media, to Facebook, to Instagram, to Twitter, to Upscrolled. Fred Edwards sharing to Upscrolled. I love you for that. Thank you. Really appreciate doing that. And then again, so Cash App, $ Indie News Network, co-fi.com/Indie News Network, IndieNewsNow.com. All right, that's our website. 24/7 streaming news. You get merch from there, and you can also leave a link for. You can leave a tip for the network, and you can also watch live. We're streaming there live, co-streaming, 1080p too. And then Substacks. I publish a Substack every day. I'm a big Substack fan, both on Notes as well as over at INNnewsletter.com. We publish at least once a week there. And at IndieMediaToday.com, I publish pretty much 7 days a week over there. So subscribe to all of that. You can pay annually or monthly subscribe over at Substack, one time over at co-fi, Cash App, or at the website. So, okay. Next, we're going to get to some more government overreach. Yay! Because we haven't had enough of that lately. I'm not even going to talk about the story with the ice gloves yet. We're going to get to that probably next week. But there's some other things that have been happening, and it's protectionism. It's Todd Blanche, the guy on the right, who was sworn in as Attorney General after some kind of a deal was made with the Senate and to confirm him as the Attorney General. He literally was Trump's personal defense lawyer. And now there is no separation between the Justice Department and the Oval Office, which they're certainly supposed to be, because they're not supposed to, they're supposed to be able to prosecute and charge the president with a crime if he commits one. But oops, I guess we can't do that right now because that's his friend and personal lawyer, and they're more loyal to him than they are at this point to the job, because they're easily replaceable by him, and he's worked his way into this for sure. And this isn't like TDS, this is legit reality. So what am I talking about here? So Indie Media Award honoree Truth Out, who has a lot of shit Libby takes. They're struggling to raise money. You can certainly help them and support them with a contribution if you believe in them. DOJ expands executive privilege to include Trump's talks with private citizens. What? The opinion from the Justice Department comes just one day after Todd Blanche was sworn in as Attorney General. So they basically have orchestrated this so that this is what you're going to get when his personal attorney gets sworn in. Right? So what happened here? Just one day after Todd Blanche was sworn in, the Department of Justice issued a new memorandum expanding what constitutes executive privilege, extending the presidential protection to conversations he has with private citizens. While not signed by Blanche personally, many legal experts view the opinion as indicating what types of arguments the Trump administration, including the new Attorney General, may employ to refuse subpoena orders from Congress should Democrats win control of one or both houses of the national legislature, all right, in the midterms and take over in January. So executive privilege, okay, is a legal doctrine used in the past by presidents from both major political parties that defines the authority of the president to withhold documents or information in his possession, okay, or in the possession of the executive branch from the legislative or judicial branch of the government. Blah, 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 right? What it means is that the Attorney General can decide what they want to prosecute or not, and what they want to look the other way on, which is fucking insane. But when there is separation, it's one thing. When there's not, it's opening the door to the kind of corruption that we're seeing right here. So, the DOJ, all right, so the Supreme Court has upheld the doctrine at various times in U.S. history, but also ruled that it is not absolute in certain circumstances, right? But with a 6-3 majority Republican court, you really think the Supreme Court's going to uphold anything? Come on. Or overturn anything? No. The Justice Department slip opinion issued on Monday was signed by T. Elliot Geiser, Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel. The opinion isn't legally binding. It doesn't have to be, but it provides insight into how the department will handle inquiries into Trump's conversations with non-executive branch figures in the future. That includes Peter Thiel. That includes Mark Andreessen. That includes Jared Kushner, who's not a government official. That includes a lot of people. As a general matter, executive privilege can apply to presidential communications with private advisors, the opinion states. Again, executive privilege has only traditionally been extended to communications between presidents and staffers within their branch of the government. This new opinion extends that to cover conversations with individuals outside the executive branch, including private, non-governmental people. So now, anyone that they decide they want to put executive privilege on, he wants to meet with the CEO of Apple. He wants to meet with Larry Ellison. Executive privilege. We don't have to tell you anything about what they said. That's a dangerous precedent. The opinion does not say that all presidential communications of this nature are privileged. Indeed, it lays out that conversations between the president and private advisors are only protected so long as they relate to official presidential decision-making or involve or reflect communications with the president or his direct advisors and are confidential. Again, try enforcing this. That's in writing. All right? But, well, it might be why Caroline became an advisor when she resigned. That's possible. It also could be to keep her quiet. It could be to keep her paid with health insurance, even though she's got a really wealthy husband. It's ridiculous. I don't know. All right. But those exceptions are vague, allow the administration to determine for itself whether a communication falls into such categories. I don't know. This memo provides a broad definition of what constitutes a private advisor. All right. Government employees who aren't within the executive branch are included, for example, as are members of the public and state officials. Right. So under this definition, a president's conversation with a member of Congress or their staffers could now feasibly fall into executive privilege status. Sure. Anything that he wants is now going to be executive privilege. Despite his name not being attached to the opinion, some observers have suggested that Todd Blanche could have been part of its compilation. Of course, you think he's going to allow that shit to go out of his office without his say-so? Given that he was acting AG while it was likely being crafted. Because since Bondi resigned, Blanche has been Attorney General. He was her second in charge. The document's delay being published the day after Blanche was sworn in may also suggest that the admin didn't want it being made public until his confirmation was assured. Yeah, let him actually get the job. This was written up weeks, months ago that this was already in the plans. But it wasn't until he was officially going to be sworn in as Attorney General, the next day they literally put this into place. Great. All right. Oh, look. Blanche gets confirmed. Trump gets an entirely new immunity, said Amanda Carpenter at Protect Democracy. I don't care what Schumer said. Fuck Schumer. He was crying on Blue Cry. Trump is scared. Sure he is. Dumbass. They all work together. There are several reasons why the Trump admin would literally attempt to create privilege doctrine out of thin air, and the impending power shift in November as Democrats attempt to take control of both the House and Senate is first among them. Maybe. I have a feeling that they may take the House, but it's going to be real hard for them to take the Senate. Especially if Uncle Fester decides to flip to be a Republican, which he's indicated that he might. All right. This opinion significantly raises the stakes surrounding both the assertion of executive privilege and decisions regarding compliance with congressional subpoenas. They're licking their chops for it to be on the other foot is what they're doing. So Schumer and the Democrats will allow this because the next time there's a Democratic president, they'll have that same executive privilege. They don't care. Okay? This is theater. They're going to pound their fist on the table because they're technically losing, but they're going to be able to use this and exploit this to their benefit also. So that's the first story about the expansion of power. The other one is another concern of mine personally, because I certainly have been against Flock and Flock on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I actually tried to put up a video about Flock or Axon, Flock versus Axon, the Ben Jordan one, and it got taken down like within a day. That was on the INN TikTok, in which it's tiktok.com/IndieNewsI, the letter I. I just tried for shits and giggles to see if they would keep it up, so you can see if it's still there. But here from 404 Media, Jason Kobler, who's been doing some really good work as an independent, the government is monitoring anti-Flock TikTok and Instagram accounts. Awesome, right? Documents from law enforcement spy centers show that the government is warning cops of extensive and ongoing chatter on social media about methods to destroy physically flock LPR cameras. We don't advocate for destroying flock cameras here. No. We're blocked because I have a pop-up blocker that's blocking all the images. Government surveillance centers are warning anti-flock Instagram posts, warning local police. They're monitoring it, right? So now we've got governments monitoring Instagram and TikTok for people that are speaking out against ALPRs. 404 Media has now obtained 4 more recent law enforcement briefings warning police to surveil or beef up patrols of areas where flock cameras are located. Now, again, this is a private company. Now, this is a deal with the city, but still, the cops, remember, cops protect property. They don't protect people. Who are they protect? This shit doesn't stop crime. Once in a while, they'll anecdotally find a thing. It's not what this thing does. Come on, everybody knows it. All right, this is designed for the snitch state, so that the surveillance grid is now getting into place, and they'll be able to track people's movements across town and be able to restrict people to 15-minute cities. Once the digital currency comes in, your money won't work outside a certain area, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Flock cameras are located. All right. So they're going to beef up patrols wherever these cameras are. These briefings document instances of flock vandalism and warn specifically about the Deflock National Week of Action against ALPRs, which is essentially a series of public meetings and protests about the dangers of mass surveillance. So that's nice, but still likely an op. So, 404 Media obtained these documents through a FOIA request. Amazing that they're actually getting responded to, because I hear the backlog on FOIA is like a year. Fusion centers are information sharing partnerships, public-private partnerships between local, state, and federal government law enforcement agencies. The documents that Dan Boguslaw and 404 Media obtained are intelligence bulletins, which are briefings to law enforcement about specific threats. All right. The data is compiled by individual fusion centers in a state and then shared more widely. Many of the documents are marked law enforcement sensitive. Well, that's not good. That's definitely not good, right? A new fusion center warning from the Colorado Information Analysis Center, right, notes that people have been utilizing the Deflock app to locate and then destroy or disable the ALPRs, or just impede them. I saw someone put a bunch of balloons in front of one. I saw somebody make a 3D printed sleeve or sock that goes on top of it and doesn't damage the camera, but blocks it. But clearly, people don't want this shit monitoring them. Governments, state governments are implementing this at lightning speed without the consent of the public. Right. They're paying off the cops by giving them access to this snitch technology, making it easier, quote unquote, for them to do their jobs. Except, again, their job is supposed to be for preventing crime, not mopping up after crime to follow everybody's movements. And we've got it. Again, I spent an hour talking about the dangers of Flock versus Axon. Axon's bad, but you need to have a warrant and a subpoena, and a judge has to be involved. And it's very specific as to what you get to see, versus Flock, where you get access to a much wider range for a full 30 days. And that's if you don't have access to one of these cameras that's widely open or that's been hacked. So there's a lot more here at this 404 article. All right, another bulletin from Wisconsin. All right, via the Northeast Florida Fusion Center. You hear that, Reef? He's in Northwest Florida. All right, there's extensive and ongoing chatter on social media such as Facebook and TikTok regarding various methods to interfere with or physically destroy Flock LPRs or compromise their connectivity. In particular, it adds that on June 25th, University of South Florida Police Department located a device during a traffic stop that could be used to identify the locations of Flock cameras. Oh, they don't want people watching them? That makes them uncomfortable? But wait, what? All right. Additional investigation determined that the driver is actively involved in the deflock movement and has written software that was made available on the internet to scan and locate vulnerabilities in internet-connected devices. Completely legit and legal. All right. So here are some of these warnings and some of the actions and bulletins that you're seeing. All right. This is the one from Wisconsin. Deflock is an open source, crowdsourced map of ALPR cameras created by a man named Will Freeman. Deflock was created to show how widespread ALPR cameras are in the U.S., and the deflock movement is a very loose term for a series of local community activists who've educated themselves about flock surveillance, including Lily, including a bunch of other people in our community, all right, is this snitch stuff, all right, and have asked their local politicians to consider ending their contracts with flock, okay? What really bothers me is how willing the cops are to protect these things and force them on us. That goes to show you how they would work for the digital overlords and harm their fellow man and neighbor. Absolutely. They don't work for the public. They work for the donor class. So sadly, unfortunately, most of them do. All right. Again, DFLOC has organized this National Week of Action where you, again, nonviolent action. Very important. Because what they're now trying to do is lump all these people in with the quote-unquote NSPM 7, domestic terrorism. But how? All right. They describe the event as a variety of public meetings, town halls, and other events intended to raise awareness about the use of automated license plate readers, that's ALPRs, in their communities, the harms of these cameras, and how we can work together to end their use. All right. The Fusion Center documents also list specific cities that have been signed up for the DFLOC Week of Action. For example, a July 28th bulletin from the North Florida Fusion Exchange notes 11 cities in Florida that have already signed up to participate. So, if you're signing up, understand you're being monitored by the government, state and federal. In addition to DFLOC's call to action, other online groups and individuals are encouraging the destruction of ALPRs and are sharing tactics and techniques. We don't advocate for any of that. We don't. Hey, if you want to do it, that's on you, pal. But we certainly want to see this stuff gone by legal means and by non-destructive manner. The other people feel differently, but I don't want to get in trouble here, so I'm going to advocate for non-violent methods here also, and not necessarily for cutting them down, because all that's going to do is cost the city more, which is going to make them more money. And that's the argument that's been going, hey, you want to cut them down? That's on you, man. I like the idea of putting a sticker over the lens. It's not necessarily damaging it, but it's actually just advertising your brand where it goes, hey, I mean, if I messed up and put it in the wrong spot, hey, sorry about that. Freeman told 404 that DFLOC has never called for vandalism of flock cameras. Again, very careful in his language. They've never called for disabling cameras or covering license plates, contrary to what recent law enforcement bulletins claim. Maybe some of the other sites have claimed that, but DFLOC is a grassroots movement that started in 2024, as I talked about, all right, focused on maintaining a public map of surveillance infrastructure and encouraging civic engagement, such as contacting local reps, hosting public awareness events like scavenger hunts, and educational outreach. All right, that's all legal. We're allowed to do that. Some of the activity referenced in these bulletins originates from accounts using the DFLOC name without their authorization. That's also going on. People claiming that it's DFLOC even though it's really not. There's also like a fuck flock or one of those. Vandalizing flock cameras wasn't much of a thing until like a month ago, until it became popular, he said. Definitely caused by people on social media who aren't them. They've been around for 2 years. So you think that after 2 years, all of a sudden now, they're now doing this? No, they have an established track record of being nonviolent and not moving to disconnect them in any means other than legally. All right. I even changed the language on the site from "you're being tracked" to an open source project mapping ALPRs. All right. For the most part, the idea of these upsets almost everyone, including just about everybody watching here, I would hope. All right. There have been a few dozen instances of flock cameras being destroyed, vandalized, disabled, or having their poles cut down. I think those are anecdotal. And again, I think they're sent to send a warning signal to people, and the dumb ones are going to actually do it, and they're going to get caught, and they'll be made an example of. Right? The bulletin then lists 7 instances of flock cameras being damaged or removed in Florida. 7. How many million people live in Florida? How many thousands of cameras have they put up in Florida? There's over 100,000 cameras in the country. And Florida's like one of the top states where they're located. Right? So as online calls for the destruction of ALPRs continue to increase, that's what the bulletin says, it's likely that Northern Florida could experience an increase in the vandalization of ALPR cameras, poles, and solar panels. Again, to whose benefit is that? Well, that would be to Flock's benefit, who ends up getting paid to replace them, and to the narrative that there is a dangerous element out there that's actually violently cutting these down, even though it's not violent even to cut them down if you take a Sawzall and you cut it. All right. Bogus Law's earlier report showed that fusion centers were warning police about calls for vandalism to ALPRs nationwide from the deflock movement. So they were using it as intel to reverse search who was damaging cameras and where. All right, 404 Media obtained documents from the Central Florida Intelligence Exchange, the Wisconsin Statewide Intelligence Center, the New Jersey State Police, the Colorado Information and Analysis Center, North Florida, and a summary of 404 Media article about deflock was sent to a listserv of FBI headquarters employees. All right, so this is all the stuff that they went through. All right, damaging public safety equipment is illegal and puts communities at risk, which is why we strongly condemn this type of behavior. It's not public safety equipment. That is debatable, whether it is keeping the public safe. A private organization that most people never consented to having their cameras pointed is not public safety, because a handful of bought-off local representatives approved and signed off on a piece of paper does not mean it's public safety, especially when we've seen how it's been abused by the cops that have access to the network already. Right? Overall, we've seen few reports of vandalism against flock equipment. So there's contradiction right there. When it does happen, we work directly with law enforcement to investigate damaged or stolen cameras, make an example out of everyone. Right? Criminal acts. Again, it's not a criminal act. It's property. It's damaging property. Public safety equipment. Again, who classified it as public safety? Nonsense, in my opinion. Right? So there's all these other alerts and notes. This article is going to continue below. Again, all this stuff is getting locked. Okay, there we go. Jason is a co-founder of 404 Media. Previously the editor-in-chief of Motherboard. Right? He loves the FOIA and surfing. So, again, the government monitoring social media for people posting about flock and ALPRs and potentially disabling ALPRs. This is where our quote-unquote tax dollars are going. Our government spend is going these days. Not to help people, but to monitor everybody all the time. And it's insane. All right. That's our government overreach segment. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. Everybody on that board already has. Appreciate them all. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. o-v.com/Indie News Network. At our website, IndieNewsNow.com. It's the name of the show because a lot of the articles that you'll find, you can actually find a link to from IndieNewsNow.com. There's also a place to watch INN live whenever we're live, and a place to leave a tip for the network. Link to even pick up some merch. So if you like the little green tie guy, you can get me on a t-shirt all the way at the bottom of the t-shirt section. All right. And then over at Substack, INNnewsletter.com for the network, IndieMediaToday.com for my newsletter that goes out pretty much every day. Pretty much dedicated to this show, but also appearances on other shows, and the INN newsletter I send out weekly to the group there, and an occasional original article. And I was thinking about cooking one up for the next segment and just decided to do this as a live segment. And maybe I'll document it all and put it down in a in article format at some point. But I want to talk about Luigi. All right. So Luigi pled guilty this week to stalking charges, which is strange. I've been covering this story quite a bit for the last almost 2 years. And it was my feeling that they botched this investigation and they botched all of his arrest and imprisonment as a justification down the road to at some point declare that a mistrial and that he would be let go. And driving me basically guilty of being hot. Yeah, well, that's a whole other story in itself. All right, is the phenomenon that became the Luigi lovers. But I heard a lot of people say that he accepted a plea deal and that this was the reason why he did this and that he made a deal with the government. And I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but I brought an article here that refutes some of that. So we're going to start with this article from someone who I've never heard of, but I searched and I was searching Twitter, and someone said this is a really good breakdown of exactly the story. So we're going to start here, and then I'm going to go down memory lane, and we're going to explain all the reasons why I feel like he should have fought this, because I feel like he would have won. And then we'll get into some other speculation beyond that. All right. Luigi pled guilty. I have questions. There was no plea deal, but there was a carefully worded admission, a courtroom full of unanswered questions, and an immediate move to kill the state case, which was allegedly the justification for doing all of this, right? So this was written by a woman by the name of Lauren Davidson Ibarra, who I've never heard of until today. But in looking at this, looking at her publication, I'm like, okay, this is legit. She is a lawyer, all right, a writer and immigration attorney in LA. All right, so she's also been closely following this trial for a long time, even closer than I have. Her publication is an astonishing achievement. So we may or may not agree with everything she's saying here. Spiritual, she mentioned, so I'm probably not going to agree with some shit she's saying, but I still think there's a lot of interesting info. So she says, it's taken me a little while longer to get this out than I'd hoped, but with my life and legal work that slowed me down a bit. Still wanted to make sure to publish it by morning so that those inclined can cozy up, take their time with it over their favorite beverage, depending on what time of day on Sunday they happen to be reading. So this was put out this past Sunday. On Friday, August 14, 2026, Luigi Mangione appeared in federal court alongside his defense team, Karen Friedman Agnifilio, and her husband, Mark Agnifilio, and pled guilty to both remaining federal charges. 1, stalking, travel and interstate commerce, and 2, use of interstate facilities. Federal counts 3 and 4 for murder through use of a firearm and knowingly using and carrying a firearm in furtherance of counts 1 and 2, respectively, were both dismissed earlier this year on January 30th, leaving only the interstate stalking charges in the federal case. This is noteworthy in that the federal count of murder through use of a firearm was the one that carried the potential of a death penalty sentence if convicted. Let me read that again, that it was noteworthy that the federal count of murder through use of a firearm, which was dropped in January, was the one that carried the death penalty potential sentence. But that was dropped. Since that charge being dismissed in January, there's been no risk of death penalty, even in the event of a conviction in the federal trial. Keep this fact in mind as you read his admission statement below, and we'll come back to it in her analysis. Again, I found this one's really interesting. As I have for every state and federal hearing since February 2025, I had eyes and ears inside the courtroom to bring you a first-person perspective that you won't find in any other reporting on this case. Also why I found it interesting. For hearings that I've not been able to personally fly to New York City for, I've had a reporting assistant in my place, as was the case for Friday's plea hearing. We both utilized the general public line without press passes, getting a spot in line 14 to 48 hours in advance of the hearing time to ensure entry. For this hearing, we were number 3 in the public line, starting at 4:30 in the afternoon, Thursday the 13th, for the 11 a.m. hearing on Friday the 14th. Wow. So this guy literally camped out overnight. Only 20 members of the public were allowed into that courtroom, with court employees taking the first 20 people in the public line's full names about an hour before opening the doors, while informing everyone past number 20 that they would be permitted to enter into an overflow room until it reached capacity. So nobody else is going to be able to see mannerisms that the camera doesn't allow them to from the overflow room, or hear voices if the camera's not working. We saw that happen with the Assange trial. So now inside the courtroom, the credentialed press occupied the lion's share of the seating, taking up the middle rows in between the 2 rows of reserved seating in the front and two rows for the public in the back. So again, so that they get the narrative straight, right? All the narrative managers get their seats. The front 2 rows on the left were reserved for Luigi's entire legal team, while the front 2 rows on the right would eventually be filled in by Brian Thompson's family and United Healthcare co-workers. Thompson's wife, Paulette, and his mother walked in together just before the hearing began, seated in the first row, now directly in front of Judge Garnett. Approximately 10 United Healthcare executives and former colleagues of Thompson then filed into the courtroom, taking the row directly behind them. Thompson's sons were not present. According to the reporter, the atmosphere in the room changed markedly and noticeably when Thompson's family and colleagues entered, becoming quiet and tense. Understandably so. Until then, there still had been much chatter among those in attendance whether or not a guilty plea would actually be entered. That's interesting. The presence of Thompson's widow and mother quickly silenced that chatter, with only a few whispers now saying that the guilty plea must definitely be happening. They wouldn't be bringing the family in if it wasn't. Soon after Thompson's family and co-workers were seated, Mangione was led into the hearing by guards on each side. Instead of a suit or even a slacks and button-down shirt or sweater, Luigi was wearing his standard issue tan prison uniform issued by the Manhattan Detention Center in Brooklyn, all right, the federal prison that he'd been sharing with Diddy since his extradition to New York from Pennsylvania following his arrest. Everyone remembers the perp walk, the Superman perp walk. Thompson's widow and mother watched him take every step down the center aisle of the courtroom, while Mangione didn't look at them at all. In fact, he continued to avoid even turning his head toward the entire side of the room throughout the full length of the proceeding. The Agnifilios sat on either side of him at the defense table. Karen handed him a stack of papers, whispering something inaudible to the rest of the courtroom, only for Luigi's ears. He appeared to review the papers, signing them with the pen provided by Mark just prior to Judge Garnett entering. That was likely the guilty plea. The hearing was officially called to order, and Karen Agnifilio immediately announced that Mangione was prepared to plead guilty. Hushed murmurs filled the courtroom. Before Mangione was permitted to enter his guilty pleas, Judge Garnett went through a series of required competency questions with him. She went over his name, his date of birth, education, mental health, before asking him if he was under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or prescription medication. He said that the only medication he'd taken was trazodone for sleep 2 nights prior, but stated that it in no way impeded his ability to understand or participate in the proceeding. Of particular interest to this writer is the fact that when asked whether he had ever been diagnosed with a mental illness, Luigi answered in the negative. Another fact for you to keep in mind that she'll be coming back to. Garnett then walked Mangione through the constitutional rights he was surrendering by pleading guilty: his right to a speedy and public trial, his right to require the government to prove its case, and his right to challenge a determination of guilt. And there's something else she made unmistakably clear, which was that there is no sentencing deal attached to this plea. You read that correctly. This was not a plea deal. Federal prosecutors did not give him anything in exchange for his guilty pleas. Wait, what? Who else has even reported this? I didn't hear this at all. All I heard was that he pled guilty and he got a deal, that he made a deal to avoid the death penalty and to avoid double jeopardy. He apparently did not make a deal. Right. That is what I want to know. Why did he claim guilty? We're going to get to my speculation later. Before taking his pleas, Judge Garnett required Mangione to explain in his own words exactly what he had done that made him guilty of the federal offenses. This is when Mangione read his prepared statement acknowledging his guilt. As he gazed down at the paper in front of him, Garnett told him that he could sit or stand. He chose to sit. Here's the full text transcription of his statement of admission and guilt that he read aloud. This is so fucking shady. I'm going to preface it right here. Performance theater is exactly how I feel that this is going, Abby. Somebody else wrote this script for him. I don't believe he actually wrote this. Whether he says he did or not, I believe he's lying under oath because for whatever reasons, and I still don't understand what those are, but we're going to get to that. Quote, after years of enduring severe pain from a broken back, navigating the obstacles of the health insurance system, and witnessing similar experiences of countless others, I learned that United Healthcare would be holding its annual investor conference in New York City on December 4th, 2024, although the specific location was not publicly disclosed. I then researched the event online. I observed that the annual conference of America's largest healthcare organization with the stated mission to make the health system work better for everyone, would be attended by company executives, the board of directors, and hundreds of investors, not doctors, nurses, or patients. Okay? In November of 2024, Luigi, I traveled from outside of New York State to Manhattan. Doesn't say from where. I then emailed the United Healthcare leadership, posing as an investor at a firm managing over $50 billion in assets, requesting information about the conference. Unlike my previous interactions with insurers, I received an immediate response within an hour. Before traveling to New York, I used a 3D printer to make part of a gun. That's what Luigi's saying. And I equipped said piece with the silencer and magazine. My travel to New York and email to United Healthcare was with the intent to unalive Brian Thompson. On the morning of December 4th, 2024, Luigi admits that confesses that he unalived Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. I shot him and he died. That's a weird way of doing that. When I did so, I understood that my actions would place him in fear of death or serious bodily injury. I knew what I was doing was illegal, unquote. Again, all very strange. I encourage you to read, absorb, and sit with that statement for a few minutes. I'm not going to indulge you. What did it bring up for you, if anything? It brought up quite a lot for her. And I agree with some of this here. But before she goes paragraph by paragraph explaining every red flag she sees, let's revisit some facts from above as promised. Fact one is that the only remaining federal charges were both stalking charges, with that murder charge and attached potential death penalty and aggravated stalking with a firearm charge, both having been dismissed in January. So, if this is the case, why did he structure a statement to admit to so much beyond the stalking, including the unaliving via a shooting of Brian Thompson? The key here is that the federal indictment ties the stalking charges to being done for the purpose of unaliving Brian Thompson, which is interesting. Fact number two is that when asked by the judge whether he had ever been diagnosed with a mental illness of any kind, Luigi had replied that he had not. This makes the defense team's June notice of intent to file an extreme emotional disturbance defense in the state trial, which was promptly withdrawn within 24 hours, even more bizarre than it already was. All right, that affirmative defense, which can result in a second-degree murder charge being downgraded to first-degree manslaughter if successful, requires establishing a psychiatric basis for the defendant's extreme emotional disturbance under which they committed the alleged crime. This necessitates turning over the defendant's full psychiatric medical record. The notice of intent to enter that EDD defense was promptly withdrawn a mere 1 day after being filed. Again, why they did that and even dangled it out there is really strange if he's now saying that he's never been diagnosed with any mental health issues. What could possibly have made the defense believe that this was a viable defense option if he had never been diagnosed with any mental illness and had no psychiatric medical record? Fact number three is that there was no plea deal in place, allegedly, at least officially. There might have been unofficially, but according to the judge that is responsible for sentencing, they're not taking any of that into account. Mangione is getting absolutely nothing in exchange for his guilty pleas, an accompanying statement admitting guilt. Why? Why would he admit this then? That means that no lawyers on either the prosecution or the defense had or could give any guarantees about what sentencing will ultimately be imposed. Judge Garnett retains full discretion over sentencing, and Luigi is not entitled to any negotiated reduction or leniency because he pled guilty. So why do it? I saw countless posts on social media from clueless Luigi Lasses. That's his admiring fans like Macy put up before, or whoever that was. I saw countless posts again that he must have gotten something extremely worthwhile in exchange for his pleas. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to it because he's too smart. This is completely false. He received nothing. Not a zilch. Arguably, the only thing he got was the ability to renew his motion to dismiss the state charges based on double jeopardy. A motion that his defense team had already made and been denied by Judge Caro due to the requirements under the state law not being met. That rule requires that either a conviction as the result of a guilty plea or a jury selection in the other case to have occurred before double jeopardy can be invoked. With the federal trial not slated to begin until 2027 and a jury selection for the state trial to begin in early September of this year, this left a conviction through guilty plea as the only way to invoke this rule. Now, the state has already kicked that case till November, until December or something, and that'll give the prosecution until mid-October to decide whether they want to dismiss the case or not from the state. Indeed, this is exactly what happened, as she predicted it would in her last article. Immediately following the entry of Luigi's guilty pleas in federal court on Friday, his lawyers walked from 40 Foley Square over to 100 Center Street, which is the state courthouse, filed a new motion to dismiss counts 3, second-degree murder, through 10 firearms counts, in light of his guilty plea. You can read the full motion there, and that's linked. So now let's hear her issues with the statement line by line. And this is where it gets really shady. After years of enduring severe pain from a broken back, navigating the obstacles of the insurance system, and witnessing similar experiences of countless others. Here we go again with the radicalized by back pain narrative. She wrote about this all the way back last January in her article, The Magical Back Injury, because she never bought the media's little privileged young man gets radicalized to commit unaliving someone after healthcare system destroys his own life origin story. Luigi absolutely did have a legitimate back condition called spondylolisthesis, all right, a spinal condition, which a fracture causes a vertebra to slip out of alignment. He's not disputing that. He did experience a worsening of his condition that caused him pain in early 2022, ultimately deciding to undergo spinal surgery to correct it in July of 2023. What's in dispute here is the mythological narrative that the media built around this very quickly after his arrest. His own Reddit and social media history painted a dramatically different picture. His posts described the surgery as extraordinarily successful. He repeatedly encouraged other people he met online with the same condition not to be afraid of his surgery, saying that he wished he'd done it sooner, as the recovery time was minimal and it completely resolved his pain. His subsequent travel and physical activity, backpacking across Southeast Asia and hiking in Hawaii, hardly suggest a man whose life had been permanently destroyed by a failed healthcare system. She again goes into all of this and more in her previous article. So I'll link that. That'll be linked in this one. More importantly, Luigi was not someone who couldn't afford medical treatment. We're talking about the scion of an extraordinarily wealthy family whose business holdings include Lorien Health Systems. Whatever legitimate criticisms can be made about the American healthcare and insurance industry, and there are plenty, Luigi Mangione was not a victim of them. He wasn't sitting at home, immobile, fighting his insurance company over denials of his needed back surgery. He wasn't choosing between his ability to pay rent or buy food and pay for surgery. However, through conversations online, mainly Reddit, with other people suffering from similar back problems, Mangione did appear to realize that they didn't necessarily have the same access that he did. He discussed the difficulties other patients encountered obtaining insurance approvals, and even advised several others about framing surgery requests around reduced earning capacity rather than quality of life, because insurers were more responsive to economic consequences, right? To hear that you're just unable to pay and broke and you may lose your house, they're more likely rather than quality of life. Now, that certainly could have affected the way he thought about healthcare, but that's very different from the story being peddled of Luigi himself spending years fighting some insurance bureaucracy that left him suffering and untreated until he snapped, right? Which brings us to the next problem that she has with the statement. Quote, I learned that United Healthcare would be holding its annual investor conference in New York City on December 4th, 2024, although the specific location was not publicly disclosed. I then researched the event online, unquote. Okay, but why United Healthcare? Of all the healthcare insurers, why specifically United? He's never identified a denied United Healthcare claim for himself or someone he knows. There's never been any claim of any personal dispute with the company. no ties or interactions of any kind with Brian Thompson. He doesn't identify some specific United Healthcare policy that he took issue with that suddenly became the catalyst. This reminds me of a John Grisham story of a lawyer that fought the insurance company. All right. He simply learned that the company was holding an investor conference in New York City and began researching it online because it was publicly posted. Then it gets even more nonsensical. Mangione explicitly calls the event an investor conference, which again is publicly listed. But in the very next paragraph, he seems to present the fact that the attendees were, in fact, investors as some sort of shocking revelation, right? And what he says again is that I observed that the annual conference of America's largest healthcare organization, with the stated mission to make the health system work better for everyone, would be attended by company executives, the board of directors, and hundreds of investors, not doctors, nurses, or patients, unquote. Yes, that is indeed what an investor conference is. He went from explicitly calling it an annual investor conference to the annual conference of America's largest healthcare organization as if it was something open to the public. Executives, directors, and investors aren't some sinister guest list. They're the people one would ordinarily expect to attend an investor conference. And patients? Why on earth would patients attend a corporate investor conference for an insurance company? Mangione's a highly intelligent man from a family that operates several multi-million-dollar businesses, including nursing homes, in healthcare. His family members have served on boards and run substantial companies, including healthcare businesses and hospitals. The idea that he researched an investor conference and was somehow shocked to discover investors and corporate leadership would be in attendance instead of nurses pushing IV poles and patients waiting for their copays is difficult for me to take seriously. And furthermore, it doesn't still answer the question, why United Healthcare? Then he says that he then emails United Healthcare leadership posing as an investor at a firm managing over $50 billion in assets, requesting information about the conference. Unlike my previous interactions with insurers, I received an immediate response within an hour. Yeah, I have questions about that statement too, but let's read what she says first. My reporter described Mangione's delivery of that last line as dry, almost a quip. But what exactly does my previous interactions with insurers mean? Which insurers? What interactions? Is he referring to his own healthcare history? The experiences of people he encountered online? Or is he saying that he had contacted other insurance companies posing as an investor and United is the only one who responded? Good question. Because if it's the latter, that creates an entirely different problem for the narrative we were just given. Did he choose United Healthcare because he independently discovered its investor conference and became fixated on it? Or had he been contacting multiple insurers looking for access to corporate events and would have gone with whichever one gave him the information he wanted first? Statement doesn't tell us. Now, my question here also is, what exactly was the response from United Healthcare? Because they wouldn't necessarily invite him to their investor conference, I wouldn't imagine, unless he were an active shareholder. So requesting information about the conference, all right, it would have to be $50 billion in healthcare assets or something. I mean, obviously he must have lied about to get them interested, but what exactly was their response? He doesn't even indicate that they sent him directions or time and date of exactly when that was going to be. Next, he says, I traveled from outside of New York State to Manhattan. From where? This question has bothered me for a very long time. We believe he was in San Francisco before this, but we don't know. The government has claimed to know when Mangione arrived in Manhattan and that he entered through the Port Authority bus terminal on November 24th, 2024. The government has further claimed and released surveillance footage of Luigi checking into a hostel in Manhattan and being detained in Altoona, Pennsylvania, with the fake ID identifying him as Mark Rosario. If investigators identified the bus, the arrival, and the passenger traveling under the alleged Mark Rosario identity, then determining where that ticket originated should have been very easy. So this lady went to the Port Authority bus terminal herself while reporting the case in New York City. She did a full walkthrough in which she documented all the cameras. The place is drowning in surveillance. Yet the origin of this crucial interstate journey remains conspicuously absent from the public narrative. Amazing how the flock cameras couldn't catch this, could they? Oh, maybe that's their justification for why we need more flocks, right? No. And now when Luigi himself is sitting in federal court, specifically admitting to and pleading guilty to a count that requires interstate travel, we get from outside of New York State. And that's it. Why are we still not being told where the trip originated? And while she's at it, what about the fake ID for Mark Rosario? Why is it nowhere in his statement that he obtained a fake ID with the name Mark Rosario? The government's case has long depended on him moving around under this false identity with an apparently sufficiently convincing identification document to use it repeatedly to buy bus tickets and check into a hostel. Where did that ID come from? Who made it? Who helped him obtain it? Maybe he 3D printed it, like the gun or the pieces from the gun, but bringing us right to my next glaring red flag, where he says, before moving to New York, I used a 3D printer to make part of a gun, and I equipped the gun with the silencer and magazine. This may be the strangest sentence in the entire statement. I think there's a stranger one. Not, I made the gun, but I used a 3D printer to make part of one. Which part? Where? Using whose 3D printer? 3D printed it with what material? Where did the remaining components come from? Where'd the silencer come from? Where'd the magazine come from? Where'd the ammunition come from? That's a lot of questions. The statement is extraordinarily specific when specificity helps satisfy the government's theory that a 3D printer was involved. Check that box too, and extraordinarily vague about virtually everything necessary to explain what that actually means. Check that box too. This matters because the ghost gun instantly becomes one of the most sensational pieces of the government's case. So this lady, again, has had questions about that weapon narrative from the beginning, particularly about exactly which components were allegedly 3D printed and whether the government's description of the recovered firearm is mechanically consistent with the way the shooting itself had been described. Those questions require more technical treatment than she's going to cram into this article, but Luigi's own formulation hardly resolves them. Quite the opposite, it raises more. Oh, and what happened to, remember these words? Deny, defend, depose? I remember hearing those words. This is another remarkable omission. Remember the words supposedly etched on the bullets, deny, defend, depose? It was practically the tagline of the entire case. Authorities claim that the words deny, defend, and depose were written on ammunition recovered from Brian Thompson's body after the shooting, an allegation that instantly became the centerpiece of thousands of headlines, memes, and theories about motive. Yet, when Luigi finally sits in federal court and admits his guilt, explaining how he targeted this guy, that he 3D printed part of a gun and then attached a silencer and magazine to it, there's no mention of the part where he etched the bullets with deny, defend, and depose. Instead, we get the next sentence, which to me is the strangest one yet. On the morning of December 4th, 2024, Luigi shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. That's impossible. Luigi was with me that morning. I don't know why he's admitting to this. Because he was hanging with me and my family. That's the whole description of the shooting. A year and a half of headlines built around an allegedly homemade weapon, a silencer, multiple shots, and ammunition carrying a message supposedly explaining the motivation for the entire crime. The sworn admission just says, "I shot him." Why doesn't it say I shot him 3 times? That's how many times we were told he was shot. 1 shot for each of the etched bullets to send the message: deny, defend, depose, right? It seems like it was important that he admit to the detail of the 3D printed gun part, but this detail wasn't required of him. So again, why? I do have my own theories on this, but they relate to the recent U.S. Supreme Court case, Bondi versus Vanderstock, but she'll save that for her next piece, so you'll have to subscribe. Then we have the sentence that actually makes the most sense to her of the entire statement. Quote, "My travel to New York and email to United Healthcare was with the intent to do something to Brian Thompson." You can see what it says on screen. Remember what Luigi was actually pleading guilty to stalking counts. One involves interstate travel. The other involves the use of a facility of interstate commerce, i.e. email. The entire strangely constructed statement was all to get us to this sentence. His travel was undertaken with the requisite intent. His electronic communication was undertaken with the requisite intent. And Thompson's death resulted. While he wasn't pleading guilty to the federal murder count, that charge again was gone, the remaining stalking offenses themselves were still tied to the alleged intent to unalive and resulting death. All right, Judge Garnett had to establish a sufficient factual basis for accepting the guilty pleas, which now there seems to be. So what happens now? Luigi's federal sentencing is scheduled for December 18th. Again, there is no negotiated sentence waiting for him on that day. Garnett repeatedly made clear that she retains full discretion, that's the judge, and that Mangione's attorneys cannot promise him what sentence she'll impose. As explained earlier in this article, Luigi's attorneys now have the federal guilty plea that satisfies the prior prosecution requirement that previously stood in the way of their Article 40 argument. They immediately used it to renew their effort to prevent the state case from proceeding. Judge Caro's granting of their motion is technically not guaranteed, but it is highly likely. I don't believe this was a Hail Mary move by the defense, in her opinion, and I disagree. I think this was always the whole point. Which brings me briefly to Karen Friedman Agnifilio and her husband, Mark. Her husband, Mark, is a former federal prosecutor who served as an assistant U.S. attorney in New Jersey, while Karen is a former career prosecutor who spent decades inside the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, ultimately becoming its number 2 official, as chief assistant district attorney. Okay? They spent years and years inside the system before entering private practice. Her personal rule of thumb has always been that becoming a private defense attorney does not magically erase the institutional worldview, the relationships, and the instincts accumulated during a career inside federal law enforcement. She never believed that this defense was going to walk into a courtroom, state or federal, and tell 12 jurors that Luigi wasn't the shooter and that the government's entire narrative was wrong, even though that's what should have happened. That road gets very messy very quickly. It forces questions about surveillance, provenance, evidence handling, and who actually did what, and potentially theories about a patsy or government involvement that a former federal prosecutor and former state prosecutor were never, in this lawyer's opinion, going to touch. This is malpractice. When the hearing ended, Luigi was led from the courtroom Brian Thompson's family and former colleagues stayed seated, watching him the entire time. And again, according to the court reporter, Luigi remained conspicuously intentional about never looking toward them as he left. All right, so you can become a paid subscriber to this publication. Again, an astonishing achievement, really good, in-depth, on-the-ground reporting that I did not see anywhere else, and a good accounting and opinion piece that not many people have apparently seen, with only 25 likes. Amazingly enough. Lauren Davidson Ibarra. Good piece. So I want to now go back. So I have others here, tweets. All right. Dirtbag Leftist, friend of the show. Let me go back here. No, here. He says, I keep seeing people praising Luigi and saying things like Luigi for president. If he actually did it, that means that the manifesto is likely real. Remember the manifesto? Oh my God, that wasn't even mentioned. The first thing he says in that manifesto is that he respects the feds. It's cool to be happy about what he did. Okay, but please don't be a hero worshiper. All right, and again, to remind people, I respect what you do for our country was the first line. I said, I still don't think he did it. I think he confessed. In this case, now I know it was not for a non-death penalty plea. It was to potentially re-enter a double jeopardy plea with the state of New York now that the other requirement for that has been fulfilled. Okay. So I'm confused by people thinking going from possible death penalty to a plea deal solely for stalking is a loss. Well, because as it turns out, that's not what was going on. First of all, there is no death penalty in the state of New York. And the death penalty was not on the table anymore. According to that article, it had been taken off the table in January. All right. So there's that. Someone else says it's not a loss for anyone who understands the criminal justice system. They have a far better chance for jury nullification in the state system than they would in federal. They also all knew. They all also knew why it was important to adjudicate this federal case first because of double jeopardy. But yes, maybe, but that's not why. I still think they wanted to wrap this up and put this thing to bed. Why he agreed to do this, I still don't understand. And let's go back to the day before he entered his plea, is that there was a new photo of Luigi from today's pretrial hearing. All right, jury selection was due to start September 8th. And as Ryan Knight had pointed out, good luck finding a jury of 12 to convict him. From the cops illegally searching him to the likelihood that they planted the gun, because the cops didn't find one on the initial illegal search at McDonald's, it wasn't found until they got back to the police station after an 11-minute ride where the cop had turned off their body cam. All right, to the public's fury at our murderous for-profit insurance system. I've always maintained that there's no way all 12 jurors would ever have convicted him. All right. And I agree with that. I think he should have fought. He did get a pretrial ruling that the jury would remain anonymous and that the trial would be open to the media and that the public would have an overflow courtroom being made available if the main one fills up, which you could be sure it would have. Okay. So that was Ryan Knight the day before he entered the guilty plea. Then Village Crazy Lady, this goes back to April, reminding people, here's what I know, is that Luigi had no history of violence at all, no criminal record, not even a misdemeanor. Luigi had mild depression, but other than that, he had no mental health problems at all. That's consistent with what he told the judge. So the official story is that a well-educated rich kid with no history of violence, no criminal record, no serious mental health issues, left his high-rise apartment in Honolulu. Now she knows where he went, but he wouldn't admit that in court, and traveled all the way across the country to New York City where he somehow obtained a partially 3D printed weapon and then carried out a perfectly targeted assassination on a healthcare CEO who was traveling and just happened to be outside his hotel at 5:30 in the morning? Then, according to the feds, this well-educated rich kid with no history of violence, no criminal record, no serious mental health issues, fled across the city back to his hostel where he collected his belongings, always keeping his face carefully covered, except for the one time when he tried to flirt with the clerk on check-in. He then went south to BFE, Pennsylvania, right, where he was arrested 5 days later after a coworker at McDonald's called the cops claiming that a customer was being weird, despite the body cams showing him just sitting in a booth minding his own business on his computer. Now, we know that the person at McDonald's actually said that a customer pointed out to her, hey, that looks like Luigi, and she called the cops. Snitch. The same cops who captured him on their body cams then did a preliminary search of his backpack where they report finding a gun magazine inside, but not a gun. These same cops then load the backpack into their vehicle, turn off their body cams, and then miraculously find the partially 3D printed gun and a notebook containing the manifesto. Then a transcript of that manifesto is leaked to Fed Ken Klippendouche, the exact same guy who also got the big leak on the Tyler Robinson Discord chats and on several other things that the CIA would love to have made public. The cops then completely fabricated a conversation with Luigi's mom and claimed that she said, I could see him doing this, when she literally never said that, and they were forced to admit this in court. These are the things I know, so yes, I'm comfortable giving him the presumption of innocence until trial. All of these things were legit. And as a reminder, again, going back to May of 2025, the latest motion had stated that the patrolman that searched Luigi's backpack at McDonald's without a warrant then repacked the items, left the restaurant with the backpack with no body cam footage for the next 11 minutes during her drive to the precinct. Upon arriving to the precinct, she resumed the warrantless search and, quote-unquote, found a handgun in the front compartment. You're telling me that you couldn't find that before? Not buying it. Okay, next. Again, there's this. Shout out to Hotspot. Let's go watch this.
And here's how. I can prove Luigi's innocent, and here's how. So, if you read the Fed's complaint, it says that Luigi left the hostel at 5:35 a.m. The hostel is allegedly near the Upper West Side, and that he arrived at the Hilton at 5:41. However, I got really curious to see if that's actually physically possible, especially for someone who has a bad back and probably can't pedal that fast, even with adrenaline. And so I went on Google Maps. 1 second. Well, if you have your regular bike, you can do it in about 19 minutes.
19
if you decide
minutes.
that you want to use a city bike,
which he
this
did.
is an option here, it takes you 23 minutes. So unless the feds are saying that Luigi is the Flash, there is no way he can go from the Upper West Side all the way to Midtown in 6 minutes. Unless the feds are saying that Luigi can teleport or is the Flash, or maybe there were other people involved that they don't want us to know about. And the fact that the eyebrows don't match, and the backpacks don't match, and the clothes don't match, and the face doesn't freaking match is why. And they know.
Okay. Again, this was from back in December of 2024. Okay. And here you have, again, the path that he allegedly took, which says 19 minutes on via bicycle. All right. From the New York City hostel to the New York Hilton Midtown. And that means he would have had to have known and gone to the exact spot, stood there, set up, and met him at that exact moment. Uh-huh. Right? Now, here's a different way. By car, it was 15 minutes because you got to go through Central Park. So there's a lot of suspicion in my mind over whether he even did it in the first place. I believe he didn't, even though he admitted to it. And here's another one. Again, Luigi never shot anyone. The NYPD's moronic timeline proves it. All right, that at 5:35, whoever did unalive Brian Thompson, all right, left the hostel wearing the gray backpack and rode an electric bicycle down Central Park West. So how is it possible that at 5:41, 19 minutes away, that same person, they didn't say that it's the same person. It says the shooter there, but it doesn't guarantee that that's actually the same person. I still don't buy that. Because again, according to the laws of physics, you couldn't get from that hostel to that spot in 6 minutes to set up and be prepared for when he walked out the door. So, again, as a reminder, that they also were informed by the state prosecutors that they were eavesdropping on all of Luigi's calls. Wait, what? And that person resigned. They were listening to his attorney calls and other calls that were going on. Wait, what? Oh, no, yeah, they forgot somehow. And I guess I responded to this at the time, all right, that this should have been a mistrial. But here, this continues from at the Luigi case. Prosecutors had stated at the time, we don't pull attorney-client calls. But yet they somehow did. Weird, huh? So, yes, when you're in a government building, always assume you're being monitored 110% of the time. In addition to the car plate scanners on lamp poles, those on police cars, almost every house has some sort of camera security device that cops can access. Totally agree. All right. But again, so reiterating that they were listening in on his privileged calls. Another reason why this case should have been dismissed. Then we go to power mapping, and I brought an article, a very in-depth article about the Epstein files and Epstein connection to Ecuador and a modeling competition in 2004 that intersected with a lot of other famous rich people, traffickers like Jean-Luc Brunel, and even Trump, I believe, was there. Power mapping said at the time that he thought that Luigi was a patsy, which was what I said from day one. All right, he says, remember how I said there was a good chance the Brian Thompson assassination was a corporate hit disguised as an adventurous insurgent violence and that Luigi was a patsy? The hitman is still out there. I still believe that. All right, United Health is under criminal investigation by the Justice Department for possible Medicare fraud. That was last May. All right, so now on top of that, as a reminder, it was literally the thumbnail for that segment of December of 2024, about 2 weeks after this whole incident happened. Literally, he's a patsy. The narratives around him scream one big psyop. I still don't understand why he would admit to doing this. Why would he take the fall and risk and sacrifice 20 years of his life if there was this amount of reasonable doubt that he even did it in the first place? Okay, so now we have the possible motivation and reason why. This snippet from Luigi's motion to dismiss the state charges tells the story about expected sentencing. The feds will seek a max sentence of life, as they said in a press conference early this morning. But that will be reduced under guidelines for entering a guilty plea sufficiently in advance of trial to a level 40 sentence, which is 292 to 365 months. Taking into account federal sentencing reductions, which could cut off 15% for good behavior, That would leave a minimum sentence of about 20 years. He's already served 2. By this guy's challenged math, Luigi could be out of prison by 2044 at 46 years of age. If the defense team is successful in getting the state charges dropped, and their papers filed today are, of course, very good, this would be an excellent result for their client, who, by his own admission, engaged in highly premeditated homicide down to the manufacturing of part of the weapon that he used, locating the victim under false pretenses, and traveling across state lines to stalk and unalive the victim. All interesting analysis. And then Rich also does a longer explanation of how he gets to Luigi being a free man by 46 or soon after. If that holds, it's an amazing accomplishment by his defense team. Not if he never did it. Okay, so my speculation here is that they told him that they were going to get him convicted no matter what. That if it looked like the jury was going to maybe let him go, they would pull it to a bench trial and the judge would use discretion to put him in prison for life. Who knows? I don't understand why he would give up now. Because now, if it's life in prison, no death penalty. So people said, well, he did this to avoid the death penalty. No, he didn't. Yeah, hashtag free Luigi. Absolutely, Abby. I love it. All right. You can take a bike on the train. That's right. But you're not supposed to. A lot of people still do. But city bikes? City bikes? I don't know too many people that bring city bikes. I guess if you rent one. But there's like a thing to put the city bike and get one wherever. You don't have to carry it around the city. Plus, not only that, there's Bluetooth tracking on every one of them. And the path he took afterwards was really straight. There are so many other inconsistencies. And you can watch that breakdown I did. And then in May of 2025, I did another updated analysis that used, I think, some of actually power mapping's analysis at that point as well. And they wanted to make it go away. Why he agreed to it, I'm not the one sitting in a jail cell with no definitive time frame for when I might have a trial, when this might be over, when I might be starting a sentence. Now, the way they were going to sentence him, the time he had already served would already count towards whatever sentence he would get. But what if he weren't guilty? He would walk out of that courtroom a free man at 26 years old. Why would you not take that chance? Especially if, with all the circumstantial evidence and the mishandling of the case by the cops. All right. It's weird about the lawyers and the fact that it's Diddy's lawyer, who were former prosecutors and people who were connected to the DA's office that were prosecuting this case. Was this all kind of orchestrated to make this all go away? I don't really know. It's fascinating to see how it all plays out. And I'm sad for Luigi. I think he was played for a patsy. I think that he was handed a piece of paper and told, sign this. This is the best deal you're going to get. Again, he wasn't going to get the death penalty. He might have gotten life in prison. Plus, he'd have had his life tied up in state court as well as federal charges going forward for who knows what. And this, again, could potentially see that dropped. Now, what about where he came from if he created part of that weapon in another state and carried it between states? That state could then theoretically prosecute him. There's also the potential, I believe, of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if in the extradition they agreed to waive the rights to prosecute him, but I believe that they still retain those rights, even though he technically didn't commit a crime other than running away from committing a crime in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure, what being a fugitive from federal justice in that state is and what kind of sentence or whatever that was. It's fascinating stuff, man. Again, how do you feel about all of this? Do you think that he did it? Do you believe? I want to see him stand in front of a camera. I want to see the expressions on his face. I want to see a real sit-down interview where you get to kind of hear it, not from a prepared statement, which I feel like was a script that was handed to him and said, say this. And the dry delivery indicates that maybe it wasn't even rehearsed. He didn't even know what it was exactly going to say when it was handed to him. He had a general idea, and then he kind of scoffed at one point when he saw one of the things, but it's so strange. It's really bizarre, the whole thing. So, again, I'd love to know what you think. In the meantime, support independent media because we need it more than ever. I appreciate everybody hanging around. I got a lot more. We haven't even gotten to fuck Israel yet. Told you it was going to be a 3-hour show. All right. The people up there have already supported this channel. I really appreciate that. Cash App, $ Indie News Network. co-fi.com/Indie News Network. Over at our website, IndieNewsNow.com, at INNNewsletter.com on Substack, and at IndieMediaToday.com, also over on Substack, where you can get all the clips from this emailed out separately as individual segments and individual videos throughout the week. And then you can also see it on INN's YouTube channel. Okay. Time to get to some fuck Israel. Before we do, I do want to see, I saw Abby said something nice. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying I was the GOAT. I saw that fly through the chats, but I think it was so long ago. I don't even see it here, but that was really nice. Luigi didn't look at them because he knew that he did that to save their lives and that they probably didn't want him to do that. I do the same. Just let me make my choice. Maybe. Right. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so again, a lot of fuck Israel to get to now. There's a lot. All right. Let's get moving. So first thing is this convention of rabbis that happened at the Barclays Center that Israel would definitely not like you to hear about. All right. There are a new type of bomb being tested in Gaza now. All right. Which literally, and I talked about Josephine Gilbo about evaporating people. This is yet another report about a bomb that evaporates people. A little bit of good news, but also horrific at the same time, that after 2 years, a father found his missing children in Gaza. There's even more. All right. And let's just get to it. All right. You've got displacement and the realities of it. And you've got Kushner and Netanyahu meeting to discuss a peace agreement that Israel's already rejected. I don't even know what they're bothering to meet for. And then we have remembering the journalists, which is also what I put in the title. Sana Saeed wrote a beautiful article and gave a speech about remembering Hossam Shabbat and Anas al-Sharif. She attended a thing. I'll get to that in a little bit. So let's start with, again, Voice of Rabbis, a video that Netanyahu does not want the world to see. Let the world know by sharing this. Tens of thousands of anti-Zionist rabbis gathered in the Barclays Center in New York City to say that the Zionist regime is a criminal and occupying gang and does not represent Jews. And I don't need to put the audio up, because it's all in Hebrew. So you can see that it's full. At least the entire lower section plus the floor is full of rabbis in black coats. Highly Orthodox religious rabbis. This, again, these are Jews that are opposed to Israel. That Israel does not want you to know even exist. or to hear their voices. Again, they're just praying and they're speaking Hebrew. They're reading from the Bible, but they're at the same time denouncing in Hebrew Israel committing genocide and claiming to represent Jewish people, which they clearly do not. Because certainly 10,000 anti-Zionist rabbis would have otherwise to say. So that was again at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York City. And that was on August 11th. That was a week ago. Next, grandstanding for 2028 already? Yeah, already. Middle East Monitor. Now, this is, again, good news because Senator Mike Huckabee, or former Governor Mike Huckabee, who also is now the ambassador to Israel, all right, has been really tough and bending the knee to Netanyahu. We saw a lot of that stuff already. Now we've got a senator calling on Huckabee to resign immediately because of how he has not represented America. And that senator is Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, who I believe is probably going to make a presidential run in 2028. He went and he's been representing the people that have been detained and illegally by ICE. And he's been really trying to ingratiate himself to a national community. So what's going on here again is that Senator Chris Van Hollen said that Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee must resign, accusing him of repeatedly turning a blind eye to the mistreatment of American citizens by Israeli authorities and becoming an apologist for Benjamin Netanyahu's extremist government. Blame it on the Bibi to a point, but also blame it on the Huckabee. It's time for our American ambassador in Israel, Mike Huckabee, to resign. It's been about 2 years anyway. It's about time for them to replace him with another stooge. The job of an American ambassador is to defend and protect the interests of the United States of America. Remember, I talked weeks ago about the American girl that is being held without charge in an Israeli prison. She was detained in the West Bank with 3 other women, 2 of which are national soccer players. And there's been no timetable. And I saw Cori Bush actually, or Summer Lee was talking about it as well. Mike Huckabee has failed to do that. He's become an apologist for the extremist government. Right. He added that American citizens have faced arbitrary detention and mistreatment at the hands of Israeli security forces, while Ambassador Huckabee has continuously refrained from condemning these practices or demanding accountability for those responsible. That includes the global Samud flotilla members like Guy Christensen that traveled to Israel and were detained in international waters and beaten and arrested and then kicked out of the country. It's actually that Van Hollen then attacked Huckabee over the Israeli detention of Sama Safi, like I said, the 20-year-old, and Adam Karak, who are both American citizens. On his watch, we continue to see American citizens mistreated, wrongfully detained. In fact, as we speak, we have a 20-year-old American student who's being wrongfully detained, a 15-year-old American boy wrongfully detained. We witnessed an 82-year-old Palestinian American man beaten bloody by the IDF. Van Hollen noted that he and 30 other U.S. senators had previously urged Huckabee to hold the government of Israel accountable for the killings of more than 9 Americans, including Ansanier Egi, just over the last 4 years by either violent settlers in the occupied West Bank or the IOF themselves. And yet there is no accountability, no justice. Furthermore, the senator criticized Huckabee over what he described as a stark contradiction between his expressions of sympathy for Palestinian Christians and his passive stance on the surge of settler attacks targeting Christian villages in the West Bank, because he's under orders. Van Hollen pointed out that violent assaults on Christian villages have escalated and that perpetrators are acting with impunity. He recalled Huckabee's dismissal of a question regarding these attacks where the ambassador simply remarked that he's a Christian and is doing okay here in the Holy Land, which, according to Van Halen, exposes the entire problem, where Christian visitors on tours in the Holy Land are being treated well when they're not spit on, while the Christians who've lived in the Holy Land for thousands and thousands of years, what about them? Mr. Huckabee, he simply doesn't care. He's become a complete apologist for the most extreme Israeli government in history. And it's partisan hackery, and it's grandstanding in order to run for president at some point, but it's also accurate. Huckabee should resign today, and then they would only appoint, my guess would be Miriam Adelson to be ambassador. Why not? Trump could appoint anyone that he wanted. So maybe, but it's a way to get his name in the paper, to shit on Mike Huckabee, which I'm fine with, but it's really to elevate his national status by dunking on a Republican on something that's low-hanging and easy. Next, again, this is the one that killed me this week. All right, is this father finds his son, his kids. After 2 years, he was told they were buried under rubble. His son and daughter.
Imagine as a father thinking that your children were under the rubble for the last 2 years. He probably had accepted the fact that his kids were gone. Imagine the children for 2 whole years without their father, without their family, probably searching every single day for the last 2 years for their father. This is the pain and hardship that they are going through every single day, guys. Each individual person has their own suffering, from death, from suffering, from injuries of losing a leg or losing an arm, sleeping in the cold or in the heat every single night. You don't understand the pain that they are going through. And this is why we need to keep helping them. You can literally donate directly to the beneficiaries with the link in my bio.
Okay. As a father, this one just killed me. I mean, again, being told that your children are gone and mourning them every day, while meanwhile they're alive and searching for you every day, and alone and confused, as this woman said, like, fuck Israel for all of this, for doing this on purpose and then laughing about it, these assholes. But most moral army, right? Only democracy in the Middle East, right? Fuck these people. Absolute barbarity. Next, we have Indie Media Award honoree Mondo Weiss. All right. This is Kosan Muadi. He's a Gaza-based, Palestinian-based journalist who writes for Mondo Weiss. Understanding Israel's campaign to destroy Palestinian refugee camps in the West Bank. Again, no Hamas there. Reminder, Israel has vowed to occupy yet another West Bank refugee camp, as it did in Jenin and Tulkarem. A new raid on the Qalandia refugee camp makes clear that the Israeli campaign isn't only about ending Palestinian resistance, but also what the camps represent. And again, this is what the West Bank looks like, hollowed out. I don't even see very many windows. I see some, but the streets are all dug up. Notice that was done by Israeli bulldozers intentionally, so that the ambulances would have a harder time getting to the hospitals when they drop bombs on the area. But that's not war crimes. That's not intentional genocide. That's not intent to cleanse. Of course it is. Nonsense. Palestinian refugee camps West Bank are at the center of the news again after the Israeli army launched a new prolonged raid on the Qalandia refugee camp, which is located north of Jerusalem and just outside Ramallah. Late on Tuesday night, Israeli forces entered Qalandia after sealing it off and proceeded to arrest, i.e., without charge, dozens of Palestinians and conduct field interrogations while distributing leaflets threatening Palestinians with arrest if they take any action against Israeli forces. Stand down, or we will detain you indefinitely without charge. In an earlier incursion at Quilandia this May, Israeli soldiers told residents to pack your things and go to a European country, even though they're not allowed to, and repeatedly invoked the name Jenin as they moved through the camp. Residents understood the reference to Jenin as a direct threat, given the annihilation of the Jenin refugee camp in the northern West Bank. All right. The current raid on Quilandia came days after Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, announced that he had instructed the army to occupy another refugee camp in the West Bank, in a repeat of Israel's occupation of 3 refugee camps in the northern West Bank in early 2025. At the time, the IDF displaced the entire population of Tulkarem and Nur Shams refugee camps in Tulkarem and Jenin refugee camp in Jenin, representing at least 40,000 people. They were never allowed to return to their homes. And they still remain displaced to this day and always will, because Israel will end up bulldozing their homes or detonating them, many of them continuing to endure a humanitarian crisis. Thank you for the $5, Willie Bragg. Christian Zionists pretend to be pro-life, but what's pro-life about cheering children's lives ended? Netanyahu is today's Hitler. Thank you, Willie. During Israel's destruction of the camps, Israeli forces razed large portions of the residents' homes, like I said, carving wide dirt roads into the heart of the built environment to supposedly create safe roads for Israeli forces to operate. They already have safe roads that Palestinians can't travel on. In reality, it's not only part of Israel's attempts to re-engineer the architecture of the camps, but to eliminate them as camps entirely, instead converting them into urban extensions of their neighboring cities and doing away with what they represent. Again, a lot more to this article, and I have a lot more to get to tonight. But this is what it's like in the West Bank. Again, no Hamas. So what's the justification for doing this to the Palestinians in the West Bank? Because they want to steal the land, they want to steal the resources, and they want to exterminate the people there. Terrible. Okay, next. More Middle East Monitor. And of course, we know that though there was a roadmap to ending the Gaza war agreed to allegedly by the Trump administration and Hamas, Israel has rejected it. And now we've got 8 countries condemning their rejection. That's nice. I also wanted to bring it because of this picture. This is Gaza. Look at these husks of buildings hollowed out. This is not AI. This is a real photo, a view of the destruction in Sheikh Radwan. And this was, by the way, following the Israeli ceasefire in October of last year. Because they don't allow flights to go over to show you how bad the damage is now, or just what they've already bulldozed and managed to level to the ground so they can build whatever the hell they want to build next. Because they're stealing all that too. Turkey and 7 other countries Sunday condemned Israel's rejection of a roadmap for completing the implementation of Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza conflict, which we know is just a stall tactic, saying that the move jeopardizes efforts to achieve a lasting peace, which of course it does. It doesn't want that. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers of Turkey, Egypt, Indonesia, Jordan, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE condemned Israel's declared rejection of the roadmap, as well as its rejection of Palestinian statehood. Again, all theater in my mind. The ministers said that the positions amount to a direct repudiation of Trump's comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, which was endorsed, amazingly enough, by the UN Security Council Resolution 2803. Why? I have no idea. They said Israel's rejection jeopardizes the plan's implementation, again, as was the point, and fundamentally undermines the collective efforts undertaken to achieve a just and lasting peace. Israel doesn't give a fuck. Such rejection confirms that Israel now bears responsibility for obstructing the efforts to bring peace in Gaza and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, which they were proudly proclaiming this entire time. That's not a shock to anyone. The minister said the roadmap, which had been accepted by Palestinian factions, was the result of extensive efforts by mediators, including Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the U.S., alongside the High Representative of Gaza and the Board of Peace. They described it as a key step toward the decommissioning of weapons, alongside the withdrawal of Israeli forces, deployment of the International Stabilization Force, transfer of administrative authority to this NCAG, which we talked about that will never exist, and reconstruction of the enclave. And again, I read an article last week that was very doomer about this, that Chris Hedges wrote, that all of this is theater in order to perpetuate the extermination of the remaining Gaza population and West Bank population, and then eventually would allow for forced transfer administrative authority, right? So it's never going to happen. Reconstruction of the enclave, which again, they've said $70 million, or what they say, 400 million, when it's going to require 70 billion to rebuild. The ministers warned that rejecting the roadmap amounts to an explicit refusal to proceed with the implementation of Trump's plan and threatens to derail U.S. efforts to end the war and establish conditions for lasting peace. This is all nice, but again, we all know this. All right? They stress the importance of sustained and active U.S. engagement to ensure Israel's full compliance with the commitments and arrangements set out under the plan and roadmap, and to prevent further obstruction. The statement said Israel bears direct and full responsibility for consequences resulting from continued rejection, obstruction, delay, or noncompliance, including any deterioration on the ground or disruption of efforts to end the war in Gaza. Again, Israel doesn't care. How are they being held accountable? Direct and full responsibility, and what will happen to them as a result? The ministers also called for the full and immediate implementation of the plan to address the humanitarian situation in Gaza. That's very nice. Ensure security and stability, and pave the way for reconstruction and recovery. They reaffirmed their support for Palestinian self-determination and statehood, categorically rejecting any attempt to deny or prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state, including through unilateral actions. All right? A just, lasting, and comprehensive peace will only be achieved, bullshit, by the implementation of two-state solution, which we know is bullshit. I believe in a one-state, universal Palestine for all. All right, by the realization of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state based on the 67 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital, which again, Israel will never allow. The ministers also underscored the importance of continued role of Board of Peace and called on all parties to support its efforts to implement the roadmap and advance the second phase of Trump's plan. Again, that means that Israel has to withdraw. Who's going to order Israel to withdraw? Other than Trump, which he's not. They urged the board, that's with a strongly worded letter, with active U.S. support and engagement, but not Trump's, to take immediate and concrete measures within its mandate to preserve the integrity of the plan and prevent any party from obstructing its implementation, as they move a bill that will further integrate our military with Israel's. So explain to me again how they're trying to stop any of this? Nonsense. More Middle East Monitor. This comes from a Palestinian. No respite from the fear of forced displacement. They get no respite because Ramona Wadi, Netanyahu insisted upon his rejection of this 15-point plan, which would see Hamas disarming and Israel withdrawing from Gaza. During the cabinet meeting, he stated that there would be no Palestinian state as long as he's prime minister, and that Israel would not agree to Trump's plan. Like I said, so all of this is for naught. It's a waste of time. It's kicking the can down the road. Agreeing to Trump's plan wouldn't have resulted in a Palestinian state, of course. That plan and the two-state paradigm had been conflated on purpose to ascertain Israel's complete rejection of any semblance of temporary alleviation. Since the start of the genocide, and particularly with each proposal that would halt Israel's violence in Gaza, Israeli officials have altered their narratives several times, from insisting upon complete Hamas disarmament, which they did, to forced transfer, which they're about to do, to debates about humanitarian aid and restrictions in Gaza, which they're still doing, the yellow line and encroachment through military occupation, which they keep moving. Each strand only points to the fact that diplomacy is not just acting as a cover for colonialism, but also participating in it. Palestinians' reality on the ground is what is missing from the political violence. As a Palestinian Ahmed stated to Al Jazeera, quote, "We have no one standing behind us to protect us. Why? What happens if or when Israel decides to further forcibly displace Palestinians in Gaza to appropriate more territory? The Board of Peace isn't functioning as safety for Palestinians. It's as contradictory as Trump's statements on Gaza. Notably, the Board of Peace did not explicitly declare itself against the forced transfer of Palestinians. However, the U.S. vision for Gaza does not incorporate a shard of Palestinian culture, heritage, or values, nor any Palestinians at all. The Board of Peace is an extension of the U.S., which has the backing of the UN Security Council. Where do Palestinians fit in these plans? And if you look at my Gaza 2035 segment from 2 Mays ago, the answer was nowhere. They had no plans for Palestinians to fit there. Even if Trump's grand plans for Gaza are not realized, it doesn't mean the Palestinians can reclaim their land. The U.S. and Israel have created too many contradictory plans, and currently the focus is on the clash between Netanyahu and Trump over the 15-point plan, mere theater. But in Israel's entrenchment in Gaza is undisputed, both in terms of actual military occupation as well as diplomatically, which is again insane. Where there's been no particular instance that Israel withdraws from Gaza. Insistence. All right. Only that withdrawal is now conditional upon Hamas disarming. If Hamas disarms, Israel would have encroached upon further territory by that time and will certainly not relinquish any land it would have already appropriated, as this would contradict the plans to colonize Gaza. Crazy. So again, views expressed do not reflect. So I got a couple more here for fuck Israel before even the Sanaa Saeed. This is the Sonic Now bomb. Palestinians describing a new type of bomb that they've never seen before, that's literally, according to witnesses, that it's more likely thermobaric, that they're evaporating people with no remains. Look at that, taking down entire blocks. Boom. Scary. So there's that. Then we talked about Kushner earlier, Kushner's brother Josh, Jared, who somehow is not a member of the government, yet is acting as Trump's chief negotiator with Netanyahu and in this Gaza peace plan, quote unquote, because he gets the contract to bulldoze and rebuild Gaza after they've cleared everybody out. So we know whose interests he works in. All right. Report that Kushner and Netanyahu meeting ends with an agreement that Israel will keep bombing Gaza. From Indie Media Award honoree Dave DeCamp and Indie Media Award honoree antiwar.com. A meeting between Netanyahu, the war criminal, and President Trump's son-in-law, unappointed, unelected Jared Kushner, a longtime family friend of the Israeli leader. Remember that Netanyahu slept in Kushner's bed while Kushner was at school, not while he was in it, but stayed at the Kushner house when he traveled to the United States. That's how close they are. All right. ended with an agreement that Israel will continue so-called targeted strikes in Gaza. The reported agreement to allow Israel to continue attacks in Gaza. What happened to a ceasefire? How can you cease fire if you're doing targeted attacks targeted at civilians? Comes despite Kushner holding a meeting a day earlier with Hamas officials, because he's a snake who meets with both sides, who said they were committed to the disarmament plan announced by Trump and the so-called Board of Peace. They're playing the game to prove that Netanyahu's doing all the things that he's going to say he's going to do. But Netanyahu and Israel doesn't care. They're going to get away with it. Later in the day, Kushner told Fox News that the U.S. wouldn't restrict Israel's right to defend itself, and that one purpose of the meeting was to clarify what that means. Sure, they'll do whatever the fuck they want. That's the clarification. He also described the disarmament deal as a win-win for Israel because either Hamas disarms or Hamas doesn't follow through, and then Israel would have a lot more support from the U.S. to go and finish the job. Didn't Trump say day one that they should go and finish the job, quote unquote, which means extermination, by the way? So if they don't disarm, now you're justified in exterminating them while they have no legal reason to disarm. They followed every single step along these guidelines while Israel's followed none of them. And yet they're going to continue to be held to that? Fuck that. Also on Monday, Trump said that Israel should stop striking Gaza because Hamas agreed to lay down their weapons. Comments that Hamas welcomed, though the results of that meeting suggest Trump isn't really serious about putting pressure on Israel to halt its attacks. Kushner and Netanyahu were joined by the Board of Peace's top Gaza envoy, that Bulgarian dude, Nikolai Mladenov, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's also an Israel simp, and Mike Huckabee, who had been called on by Chris Van Hollen to resign. The Haaretz report said that the officials agreed to allow to work to begin in Gaza on sanitation infrastructure to prevent disease outbreaks and contamination of groundwater and coastal waters. I guarantee you that's not going to be for the Palestinian people, but for the new construction that they're going to initiate. They'll get to the Palestinians at some point, but not yet. But broader reconstruction will still not be allowed. These motherfuckers. They also discussed a preliminary plan that would involve Hamas handing over its weapons to a force led by Jasper Jeffries, a U.S. Army general who's been designated as the commander of the International Stabilization Force, which is supposed to deploy to Gaza under Trump's plan. But the Haaretz report also said that Israeli officials expressed skepticism about the disarmament plan. I'm skeptical of Israel's part in it, and Netanyahu and other Israeli officials have repeatedly rejected the overall proposal. What are we talking about here? An Israeli official told The Guardian that there had been no breakthrough in the meeting and that Israel would continue to carry out operations in Gaza, business as usual. That doesn't even count Lebanon. Israel's attacks in Gaza since the so-called ceasefire deal was signed in October of 2025 have killed at least 1,265 Palestinians and wounded another 4,198, according to the latest numbers released by the Gaza Health Ministry, which we know is a severe undercount as well, especially if a thermobaric weapon is vaporizing people. The ministry said that over the previous 48 hours, Israeli attacks have killed at least 2 Palestinians and injured another 15. They're not stopping. Every day they're doing this. Fuck Israel. Okay, now we're going to get to the Sanaa Saeed article and video, and I'm not going to play it. It's a 10-minute speech that she gave. But let's get to her article about who remembers the journalist that has this speech at the beginning of it. Who remembers the journalists? I'm a paid subscriber, by the way, to Views My Own, Sanaa Saeed. Big fan. What's up, Tom? How are you? Misfit 1904. On August 12th, Writers Against the War on Gaza, WAWOG, launched a project, The Living Record, eulogizing the over 260 Palestinian journalists targeted and killed by Israel through recorded oral testimonies of their loved ones and colleagues. Okay, and there's a statement about that from the press release. On August 14th, okay, that organization, the Palestinian Feminist Collective, and the Palestinian Youth Movement held an event, Keeping the Record Alive, in tribute to Anas al-Sharif and Gaza's slaughtered journalists. Sanaa had the honor of speaking at this event. The video is featured in the talk, and below you'll find the incomplete transcript. She spoke following the showing of harrowing testimonies from Palestinian journalists about their lost loved ones, reminding us in their devastation that every martyr is a universe. On March 24th of last year, Palestinian journalist Hossam Shabbat was martyred at the age of 23 when he was targeted and killed by the Israeli occupation forces. We all have had moments throughout this last 3 years that broke something in us, something that has no prospect of being fixed. For Sanaa, it was Hossam's murder. But something unexpected happened that day. She received a message from his Twitter account. They had a history of exchanging messages across platforms, and seeing that particular notification made her catch her breath. What if the news of his murder had been wrong? But Hossam was gone, and the message from his account was from a friend of his who shared things that Hossam had said, saying in passing that he saw and read everything. In other words, Hossam, like all Palestinian journalists, like all Palestinians we were watching online, wasn't just documenting and sharing the extermination of his people, but was also witnessing in real time the world's most powerful institutions and people debate and dispute whether he and his people could even be believed. Hossam read and saw everything. Every inch of our country, the U.S., is complicit. A word that still feels insufficient to describe exactly what we did, what we allowed, what we justified, and what we buried. But tonight we speak of the complicity of our storytellers, our institution, journalism, the co-authors of the extermination. All right, so I'm going to leave a link to this, and you can read the rest of it or watch the speech. It is moving. And I will just also point out when I shared this that I said, I remember and I'm infuriated that they were murdered for telling the truth. Thank you for doing this and for sharing this, Sanaa. Big fan. Okay. That wasn't too bad. No, it was about 30 minutes. So fuck Israel for all those things. All right. Yes, Abby. Board of Peace from these people is always the antithesis of what they claim. They're the board of extermination is what they are. Not even the board of war. The board of extermination. Yes, Jessica, it's a shame that so many years this shit has been happening and most of the world was silent. Amen to that too. Okay, thank you for joining and thanks for commenting over on Substack. Yeah, so someone explained to me what's Marxist Leninism? Right, I am now going longer than last week. I told you, I was warning you, because I still have a lightning round and GoFundMe's. So we're going to go to 3+, but that's okay. Yeah, it's just, wow. The inordinate suffering that the U.S. and Israel and the U.K. and the rest of the Western world are all inflicting upon the Palestinian people is disgusting and needs to stop. Abby, that's great. It should be occupied Palestine. You're absolutely right. And it is so sad, and neither party will stop this because the money train has flowed that way. Okay? And Willie Bragg, there's only one solution. Israel needs to stop existing, and it needs to be replaced with a new secular state for everybody. Amen there. Palestinians, Jews, and Christians, which doesn't favor any group, but equal. Except that they're the majority, and again, that's what the Israeli Jews are worried about, that there are more Palestinians that would instantly outnumber them, and that that the Israeli Jews would then be voted out of power completely at some point, and it would just be a matter of time. All right, go start. Today in Gaza, IDF slaughtered a family in their car, leaving severely traumatized young boy who survived in the middle watching his family die. The photos are horrific. I covered one of those weeks ago, same type of thing. They just continue to do it. It's just horrible. I feel terrible about it. Good night to Neelio Nostrum again. Really appreciate you joining the Wall of Fame and supporting independent media, supporting INN. Abby and Neelio do a show called Noteworthy on Abby's channel, Abby Do. So go click on Abby's name and you'll be able to find her channel and subscribe to her channel there. Really cool. And I was a guest on their show. Really appreciate the analysis, the coverage. And they also have an open stream where they'll put a StreamYard link in, and anyone who wants to join StreamYard, almost like a Zoom call, camera or not, can join the conversation. And I appreciate that you guys do that. Again, Cash App, $ Indie News Network, co-fi.com/Indie News Network, INNnewsletter.com over on Substack for our network, or my Substack where we're live now at IndieMediaToday.com. And the name of the show is called Indie News Now because I created a website called IndieNewsNow.com. It's a 24/7 ad-free fire hose of article content. Now I'm adding some videos in as well. A link to them. We're not trying to steal that content. We want to link to the original site and showcase these great writers and independent journalists and outlets. Okay. And we want to link you to them directly and be that bridge in between. You could also leave a tip for the network there. There's a Stripe plugin. You can watch live anytime we're live. If you're not on any of the other platforms, you can go to Indie News Now Live or IndieNewsNow.com/live and watch us live. And then you can also go to the merch store. You can pick up some merch, t-shirts, hats, hoodies, stickers, and tank tops. So, and I learn a lot from you too, bro. I read your article, by the way. I thought it was excellent. Long, and there was a lot of information in there, an info dump, but I did read your article on Substack. Neelio actually published his first article on Substack a couple of months ago, and it was really in-depth, talking about LaRouche and its influence and a lot of people surrounding it. Very interesting. Some of it I agree with, some of it I'm not sure about. Definitely learned quite a bit from it. Jessica, we need to also stop this bill at the House already passed because they want to merge the military with the Israeli. Yes, especially the intelligence portion. And I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Gen X girl, and I know that we have issues with her supporting some of the AIPAC people, but she also has been screaming the alarm and beating the drum about this. I think it's 8807 is the bill that's in front of the Senate right now. My guess is that they will vote it down, but I don't know. The last time it was in front of them, they voted it down. Will they get bought off? I don't know. Well, remember, Mitch McConnell's not even alive to hold a Senate hearing on this or to be present for one. So that's even one further vote that they're not going to get that they would for the Republican side. So, okay, I'm going to get to our lightning round where there actually is some good news. Amazing. You know, it's not all doomerism. I try not to bring doomerism. And I'm just going to bring headlines here. I'll whip through these, and then we'll get to the GoFundMes because I know it's super late. So we've got USA's Latin American takeover is in full swing. Arturo Dominguez. David McBride freed. What? Yes. A lot of people seem to miss this. I did not, naturally, because that's somebody that we've been talking about for years. Local elected officials are squirming from this guy giving a speech to his town council. And then I do want to get into a little bit this article about the DNC's elderly phone scam and all the text messages and the pressure campaigns that are happening. There was a deep dive investigation, and I'll get to it, but the New York Times throttled it and decided not to publish it. So the author went to Substack and published it themselves. And it's fascinating what they uncovered. And I'm guessing that the New York Times didn't want to cover it because it implicated the I'm sorry. It implicated the Democrats. Jessica, I just wrote an article about it, but we need to be careful anyways. Yeah. Okay. If you could tag me on Twitter or tag me on Substack at Indie on notes when you put up a note for that, and I'll take a look. I'd love to take a look at it. Thanks. So we're going to start with Arturo. The U.S. attempt to take over Latin America is moving full steam ahead. And he's specifically referencing here now Colombian President La Esprilla is the latest Latin American leader to join the U.S.-backed far-right coalition seeking to control the Western Hemisphere and implement an Israel-first agenda on top of it. So after interfering with several elections, the U.S. continues to declare its ownership of Latin America, even though nobody asked it to, and the Caribbean, with a new propaganda video released in conjunction with various statements and military incursions under the guise of counter-narcotics operations. Remember, that's why they were blowing up boats in the Caribbean as well, and the Atlantic Ocean. Those operations have so far served to create more violence and instability. Notably, something rarely discussed in U.S. news media is that many of the leaders Donald Trump helped elect have ties to some of the most notorious drug smugglers in recent history. The White House's recent interference in elections beginning when Trump took office in 2025 to install U.S.-friendly right-wing leaders is nothing new. History speaks to this better than anyone can. It's common knowledge, even if lay people don't know the details. The Monroe Doctrine is also well known, though not widely as the broader history. Since Trump took office in 2025 again, however, it's been brought into the spotlight much more with his Donroe Doctrine. However, it's the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine that the White House latched onto, which is that this hemisphere is ours. But they also claim that that West Asia is ours, and that Taiwan is ours, and that Alaska is ours, and of course Okinawa and the Philippines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a demand to European countries introduced by President James Monroe in 1823. The idea was to warn Europe that the Western Hemisphere was closed to future colonization after Latin America liberated itself, with some help from the U.S. and Cuba and the Caribbean toward the end of decolonization. While it didn't explicitly declare control, the doctrine stated that attempts to interfere in the Americas would be treated as a hostile act against the United States. It's like NATO. It's a pact. If you attack my little brother, you're attacking me, and you're going to get attacked back by me. All right? However, in 1904, Teddy Roosevelt added his corollary, claiming that the U.S. had the right to control Latin America as an international police power. So, again, you can continue to read this piece by Arturo. Again, extremearturo.substack.com is his publication. Next, I wanted to get to a case that we had been talking about on my shows and on INN News for more than 2 years. And that would be the case of whistleblower and Assange supporter David McBride. He's an Australian, all right? Again, military whistleblower who revealed Australian war crimes that were committed in Afghanistan, has finally been released from federal prison after a lung cancer diagnosis. So it's not all honky-dory, though. Misty said if there's anyone that could beat lung cancer, it's David fucking McBride. David was on many Action for Assange's, was a supporter of all of the efforts by the activist community to free Julian. And David also is an Indie Media Award honoree, as, by the way, is Consortium News' Joe Lauria. David McBride, the military lawyer who leaked evidence of Australian war crimes in Afghanistan to the media, was released on parole Thursday after being diagnosed with cancer following more than 2 years in prison. Reminder that he was sentenced to 6 years when he pleaded guilty after the trial judge in November of 2023 denied him a public interest defense and allowed government agents in the courtroom to seize reams of his documentary evidence in the name of protecting national security, which had never been done before. We covered that at the time. Unprecedented what they did to him. McBride was convicted of unlawfully communicating naval, military, or Air Force information other than in the course of his official duty, as well as publishing confidential information outside of his duty. He was also convicted of theft of government property. McBride gave the government documents to journalists at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, which revealed covered-up murders of unarmed civilians by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan that McBride served with. A 4-year government inquiry later found 23 possible war crimes, including the murder of 39 Afghan civilians. After that broadcast, the Australian Federal Police raided the ABC Sydney headquarters, commandeering computers to seize a number of documents while making changes to others. Prosecutors ultimately declined to pursue charges against the ABC journalist that broadcast the report, deciding instead to go after McBride. The defense rested on the court accepting his argument that his oath to the British Crown meant that his duty to inform the nation of his government wrongdoing transcended his obedience to military orders. Make sense? All right. His lawyers invoked the Nuremberg principles, in which a soldier has an obligation to break an oath to report serious war crimes. But his trial judge rejected that defense. Okay, and he accepted his attorney's advice that left with no viable defense, he should plead guilty, like Luigi listening to his attorneys. But in this case, they were probably right. In its report Thursday, the ABC repeated a misconception about the McBride case. Why? They're saying that his aim was to expose what he believed was the over-investigation of soldiers in Afghanistan. But that's not true, but his decision backfired with the ABC's Afghan Files story, instead revealing allegations that Australian Army soldiers were involved in illegal killings. In fact, David had alleged that lower-level Australian soldiers were being over-investigated while their superiors were escaping scrutiny. Quote, "I've always been about the leadership. I've always thought that we have serious problems in the defense force," he said. "The war crimes were a symptom of bad leadership, and the people in my sights have always been the generals." Okay. There he is after he walked out of the courtroom in 2023, or before he walked in for his trial, where then he was found guilty and taken to prison. He was made to pay a severe price for having the courage to reveal crimes of his government. His trial judge upheld the authoritarianism of a political system that puts obedience to the military and to the state before justice, with the blood of innocent Afghans meaning too little to move the court. In May of last year, his appeal was rejected, and I remember covering that on How Do We Miss That? In a hearing that lasted 3 minutes. They didn't even let his attorney get to the thing. They tried to call it so that nobody could actually get there on time. And they changed the time to 3 hours early. McBride told Consortium News in Canberra on Thursday that he believes he was released because of his lung cancer diagnosis. Australia's Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, who granted the parole, initially wrote a 30-page assessment in June giving reasons why he shouldn't be released. So it was kind of a surprise. His cancer was detected almost about a month ago, and he said it would probably be bad optics to keep him imprisoned once his illness was made public. He'll be operated on within the next 4 weeks to have part of his lung removed, and he'll be hospitalized for a week. In a statement after his release, McBride thanked the prison staff who treated him with professionalism, respect, and humor for his entire time in custody. Okay. I'd also like to thank my fellow prisoners at the Australian military complex. They too showed me humor, respect, and character I'll never forget. Many of them I hope to see again and help if I can, as they help me. He thanked the Attorney General for sparing us another long fight over the question of parole. After all, we both want the same thing, a better Australia for our children, so it seems a waste to be fighting each other rather than working together. I don't know if I want to work together with them either. A joyous McBride met with his friends and supporters at a Canberra pub on his first day of freedom. Kathy Vogan, our friend, was there and filmed her report. Okay. So that's great news. And again, David McBride, Indie Media Award honoree. Wrong one. This one. The button's next to the support button. Indie Media Award honoree for 2024 for special honors for going above and beyond and being that whistleblower and having the courage to be willing to face prison and the charges that were in front of him to pursue this. And there's more about his case and his story here. If you go to indiemediaawards.substack.com, you go down to the special honors section, and you can see, you go to all of them and you can see the link to his. All right. Now also this is such fire. So this guy, all right, I don't know who Brandy Wells is, but we've been talking a lot about flock surveillance. Well, this guy has an answer for his local officials. Let's listen to what he has to say.
This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to call for more flock cameras. That's right, I want more. I want them in the commissioner's offices. I want them in front of commissioners' houses. I want them in front of the sheriff's house. I want them in the sheriff's office. Anytime the sheriff or commissioner leaves their house, a drone should launch from the camera and follow the all around. This drone will stream that data to the public in real time. Don't worry though, they are just license plate readers. It's just taking pictures, no big deal. I'm totally not lying to you. Nope. Chip said he wants as many as he can get. Well, let's start here. Don't forget to spring extra for the digital ID scrapers on them so we can track your unique Bluetooth identification numbers in real time as you move. These things even get the microchip in your dog. It is definitely not a slippery slope of constitutional liberty. The bought-off shill of a judge said so because they are on public land. I always thought public land belongs to the public, but I guess we can just put whatever out there regardless if 70% of the voters don't want it. We should keep going though. A judge hasn't stopped us yet. Let's also live stream y'all's email boxes to the public 24/7. Every government phone should have a digital clone online that every taxpayer can go and view your text messages, listen to your phone conversations, view your call history, app data, and voicemails on that device. All this data will only be stored for no more than 30 days, though. You have my word on that. I've been totally honest to this point. That'll make it acceptable, though, right? You can get all this for the low price of a few $100,000 a year. We're already about to flush $200 million down the crapper on a basin or boondoggle while talking about making cuts to the animal shelter. So why not spring some extra money, not on government surveillance, but surveillance on the government? If you are not willing to have this level of transparency in your public office as a public servant while you erect surveillance state around the citizenry, you are a hypocrite. And Jesus warned us about these things. I guess I should have specified to whom this opinion would be unpopular to. So how about we just call it a day and get rid of these geolocation and target painting tracking systems that treats everyone like a criminal out of our American community. Thank you. I do have one quick question, guys. I noticed that Willie Nelson over here and Commissioner Barry, you guys had a little private powwow sidebar in the back there. As I understand, that is a sunshine violation. Everything at these meetings must be on the record.
With the attorneys, only between the commission.
So just make them squirm. I love making them squirm. Yes. Hey, if they're going to put flock cameras and surveil the rest of the neighborhood, I think it's perfectly fair that we put one right in front of their houses and track them and make a phone available and all the things that he suggested. And you want transparency? You want visibility into what everybody else is doing? Well, you're a public servant, so we should get visibility into what you're doing too. Amen to that, man. Totally agree. Okay. So the last thing, again, is this article called Hook and Squeeze. So Hook and Squeeze is an article written by this guy, Adam Bonica. All right. How Democratic consultants, committees, and party leaders built a fundraising spam pipeline that funnels money from a captive pool of elderly donors into their own operations. This is why you see those emails that go out, emergency, are you ignoring us? Slashed and fear mongering, right? So this investigation was originally developed for the New York Times, where it underwent 8 months of editing, multiple rounds of fact-checking, and independent replication of the underlying methodology. The piece had a scheduled publication date when requests for comment were sent. It was only after the Times reached out to the subjects of the investigation for routine comment that the Elias Law Group, representing the DCCC and the Democratic Senate Committee, sent a cease and desist letter demanding that the paper not published. Although the paper's fact-checkers and legal department later cleared the piece before sending out a second round of requests for comment, the Times ultimately decided to kill the piece. The piece was subsequently slated for publication at the Bulwark, where it underwent additional fact-checking, data verification, and legal review. When requests for comment were sent to the subjects of that investigation, lawyers representing Progressive Turnout Project and Mothership Strategies likewise responded with legal letters demanding that the article not run. From there, the publication was repeatedly delayed. The piece cleared successive rounds of legal review. When asked for a committed publication date after months of delay, the Bulwark conditioned publication on his accepting an extensive rewrite prepared by its editors that, in his assessment, removed key empirical findings without explanation, introduced claims contradicted by the data and fact-checking record, and then presented the subject's legal defenses as his own conclusions. When he declined to publish under those terms, the piece was released back to him. What follows is the complete investigation that emerged from this year-long process. So I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs, and I'm going to give you the link to this because this is long, but it's really, really important to understand. This is why they're sending out these emergency fear-mongering emails multiple times a day. If you've ever donated to a Democratic campaign, including Bernie's, you know the messages never stop. All hope is lost. We're begging. Quadruple match expires in 180 minutes. They arrive at all hours, claiming to be close to tears because you haven't sent $15. Most of us dismiss them as annoying spam, but federal election records reveal a hidden population of seniors for whom these messages prove surprisingly effective. What reads as parody to one recipient may be psychologically triggering for another. To understand how the system works, this writer combined contribution data from the FEC with age data from the voter registration lists, covering more than 300 million donations. The donors who send money in response to Democratic fundraising spam are overwhelmingly elderly, and a surprisingly concentrated group of them accounts for the bulk of the money raised. Looking closely at the donation data can be heartbreaking. An 85-year-old retiree in Oxford, Ohio, made more than 7,800 donations, totaling over $648,000 to Democratic causes, more than double the estimated value of his home. A 91-year-old woman residing in the senior living facility in Indianapolis donated over 25,000 times, totaling over $250,000, burning through money she may need for care. As the New York Times reported in 2021, the all-caps writing and manufactured panic of the political fundraising spam function as a filter, repelling savvy donors and taking advantage of the same cognitive vulnerabilities that make seniors targets for online fraud and scams. A 2024 CNN investigation quoted a complaint from one person who discovered that their 93-year-old father was being inundated with Democratic donation appeals. Quote, "These fraudsters need to stop defrauding other people," it read, "especially ones with mental impairments," unquote. Who's behind this flood? Well, we find out that it's a thriving industry of digital fundraising consultants who specialize in offering spam as a service and the political action committees and candidates who adopt their methods. Together, they form a broader network of fundraising that deploys these methods at scale. The most visible players in this ecosystem are what I call spam packs, organizations that use high-volume digital fundraising firms to raise small dollar contributions only to sink a disproportionate share of those funds right back into fundraising. They're built on a common financial model, outsized spending on aggressive digital messaging that repeatedly extracts donations from a disproportionately elderly, and I would guess poor, group of donors. But these tactics have spread throughout the party. Even the party's own congressional campaign committees and some of its most senior leaders have embraced the spam. Well, if it raises them money, Republicans went all in on these tactics first and offer a cautionary tale. After flooding supporters' phones with fundraising spam in recent election cycles, their grassroots donor base, the party supporters who occasionally give when something moves them until the spam drives them off, has been hollowed out. Republicans raised less from small and mid-sized donors in 2024, a presidential year, than in the 2022 midterms. Also because they got gobs of money from Elon Musk and the crypto industry and Miriam Adelson. They didn't need to raise those same mid-sized donations. Plus, they had all the shadow PACs and LLCs and the help of Jack Cobb and the EAC and all the thumbs that are on the scales. The organizations and individuals named in this investigation were offered the chance to respond. Of those who did, most answered through lawyers in letters demanding that the investigation not be published. None identified an error in the underlying FEC records. One quantitative dispute over how expenditures are categorized is addressed below. Much of what the letters denied, this piece does not claim. Some of their objections went to the methodology, but most were directed at the author, his credibility, his motives, his qualifications to write this at all. They're not disputing the data. He's a political scientist who studies money and politics, but he's also a lifelong Democrat. So he's investigating and doing a postmortem on the party that he loves and is loyal to. I believe my party is doing itself a disservice by following Republicans down this dark path. Winning back the House this year on the back of Donald Trump's unpopularity would not be enough. He thinks that they need a party capable of sustaining a durable majority to force authoritarianism into permanent retreat, a party that commands genuine enthusiasm and broad public trust. You're not getting that out of the current Democrats led by Chuck Schumer, pal, I hate to tell you, and Hakeem Jeffries. This fundraising model is not the way to build it, which I agree with. He said he's been documenting these tactics while also experiencing them himself. Like millions of Democrats, he finds his inbox and phone flooded with urgent appeals at all hours. When he used FEC records to look into who was lighting up his phone, a pattern emerged. The same handful of digital consulting firms kept appearing in the payment records of the senders. One of these firms, Mothership Strategies, has drawn particular scrutiny in recent years. Founded in 2014 by three veterans of the DCCC, Mothership commercialized the party's most aggressive fundraising tactics. The firm's principals soon co-founded their own PAC, End Citizens United, creating an arrangement in which for a time they were both client and vendor. That's incestuous. Between 2015 and 2023, ECU spent roughly $20 million on Mothership services, Peter paying Paul. Where'd they get the $20 million from? In response to a request for comment, ECU confirmed that Mothership helped launch them and ran its digital fundraising campaign, though it emphasized that Mothership had not had the decision-making authority since 2016, and the vendor relationship ended over 3 years ago. Oh, no, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing at all. But then the high-volume model has spawned competing firms. ECU simply hired new vendors and kept spamming. Spam packs rarely operate in isolation. This guy's analysis of FEC data shows that they cluster into networks linked by a small number of treasurers who oversee multiple committees at once. This tracks with what Robbie Yeager, Indie Media Award honoree, has also been uncovering. The largest one he found here is the group of PACs connected to the Progressive Turnout Project. Harry Pascal, a longtime accountant turned Democratic fundraiser, is the treasurer for Progressive Turnout PAC, and 7 additional PACs whose affiliated status allows them to operate as a single network. These are the treasurers for hire that were involved in the Clark Fork network of fundraising that Robbie talked about, and others as well. Through 2025, Pascal's network of PACs raised more than $390 million from individual donors. According to this guy's analysis of FEC filings, roughly 20 million of that went directly to Democratic candidates or funded independent expenditures supporting them. Another 100 million or so covered field and get out the vote programs and payroll to staff them, and roughly 20 million went to administrative costs. That means that the rest, an estimated $249 million, or 64 cents of every dollar raised, went back into fundraising itself. They were funding their own spam by a mile. The Progressive Turnout PAC declined to comment on the record, but in a letter, its lawyers claimed that the group spent $177 million on fundraising, $72 million less than his estimate, and directed more than half of its budget to voter contact. That discrepancy comes down to labeling. Roughly $48 million of the difference was spent on Facebook ads that they categorized as digital organizing, but which function almost uniformly as fundraising solicitations. Other payments went directly to firms specializing in high-volume donor solicitation. Even by their own accounting, fundraising consumed roughly 45 cents of every dollar. Harry Pascal, the treasurer, didn't respond to requests for comment. Why should he? Nobody's demanding that he do that of real substance. And there's a lot more here. And here are the number of donations, individual donations to each individual PAC that were made by small donors. Millions of donations. All right, or these are the emails that were sent, or is this the donations that were raised? 145 these are the PACs. Based on my analysis, these PACs share a common profile, heavy reliance on high-volume digital fundraising vendors, fundraising costs that consume a disproportionate share of what they raise, and a donor pool that skews overwhelmingly elderly, even compared to other PACs. More than that, they draw on the same concentrated overlapping population, people like the 85-year-old in Oxford, Ohio, and the 91-year-old in Indianapolis. Jesus. Those are total itemized contribution transactions from individuals reported to the FEC, not dollars raised. Those are individual donations, number of donations. So that's even higher. Again, Meta's ad library gives us a sense of whom these ads reach. Among the fundraising ads run by the largest spam PACs, 75 to 80% of the impressions are delivered to users 65 and older. What a shock. Though people in that age band account for just 14% of Meta's adult users in the US. So it's a fear campaign. These are, seniors that are on there to see their grandkids and their high school reunion friends and war buddies. And they're being flooded with these panicking Democratic Party ads. Again, very important, deep investigation. I highly recommend everybody go to On Data and Democracy. The data, the number 4, democracy.substack.com. Again, I will link these all in the Substack after the show is over. All right. All right. So that is our lightning round, and not so lightning because it's already after 1 o'clock. I know it's late. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out I'm going to do the GoFundMe's, and then we'll get out of here. Again, thank you to everyone. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. Those awesome people already have. Okay, Nahila Nostrum, first time this week. He contributed. He's up on the board now. Golden Monarch did that recently. So did John Simonian and Martin Ludford and Kimberly Bridges earlier this year at IndieNewsNow.com. And Hans Klein for an annual subscription over at IndieMediaToday.com. The ways to support financially, Cash App, $, Indie News Network, go-free.com/Indie News Network, at IndieMediaToday.com on Substack, or at INNNewsletter.com, at IndieNewsNow.com. That's our website. Again, 24/7 news, and you can leave a tip for the network there, or you can get merch as well, or watch live. You can do all that there. And that news is well more than, it's over 100 sources. I curated it completely ad-free just to get you to the good stuff that you need to see. Okay. GoFundMe's, and then we go. Okay. Words of will. I've been talking about this since May. In May, his wife, Elizabeth, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and her job had just cut her to part-time. And they had no insurance. They're going through a charitable hospital that takes her case. She had her chemo. They are in debt. In early June, their washer and dryer went, and his car died, so he can't even do DoorDash. Will is currently taking some kind of a class right now, so that, and he's taking care of the kids while Elizabeth recovers from her first round of chemo. I don't know what's next for them, but they could really use your help. And again, the link to her GoFundMe, I'm going to drop in the chats now. They have 2 sons. They live in, I believe, the Myrtle Beach area, and they have no family help. So suddenly they're facing new financial, physical, and emotional realities. 2 boys, 6 and 8. I feel for that big time. Again, as a father of young kids, I can't even imagine having to go through that. Okay, next. Natalia. Cowboy Kitty was in chat. I don't know if he's still here, if he's faded and we lost him because he had to drive his truck. But this is Cowboy Kitty's sister-in-law. I know, Earl. I understand, man. I appreciate that. And if you could share the GoFundMes, that's cool. If you could tell people about them, that's fine. I understand that things are really strapped right now and things are tough for everyone, and not everyone's going to be able to contribute. Natalia is Cowboy Kitty's sister-in-law. 15 months now, she has been locked up in an Ohio ICE detention facility. While ICE makes money, the state of Ohio makes money, and they continue to keep her locked up pending a deportation that she's appealing. Even though she had asylum, she was pulled over pending a DUI charge, which apparently would suspend the asylum. But if she was not guilty, I can't imagine that they would still hold her to that. I don't really understand. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how that all works. I just know that they could use a couple of bucks also, and that we reported back in April when Kitty got to talk to her on the phone that the food is terrible, that the guards are not really warm and friendly, which we wouldn't expect there to be. Nobody there speaks her language. She's Ukrainian, so she speaks Ukrainian. And that there is more going on there than she was comfortable saying over a line that she knew was being monitored by ICE and who knows who else. So there is a link to Natalia's GoFundMe. Okay, now we have Justice for Aspen. Been talking about this story for too long, since last May. Aspen was took a ride with a friend of a friend to a music festival in Florida. On the way back from Florida, driving through Georgia, the RV they traveled in got pulled over, searched, and the cop found mass quantities of drugs, charging everybody, including Aspen, in the vehicle with trafficking. She spent 15 days in lockup. You can learn all about her story. Sent in Bloom wrote an article about it last year. I did an interview with Aspen and her mom. We did a live stream fundraiser back last October that Jesse Jett played requests for a couple of hours, and we raised several $1,000s towards her defense. She's going to need a lot more than that. Okay. And then she also, by the way, has art, which you can purchase or commission so that you can contribute that way too if you don't want to actually just like give to a GoFundMe. This is the link to the actual GoFundMe itself. And if you're able to and of means, please support justice for Aspen and her mom, Halo Benson, former Assange activist, Oklahoma for Assange. Big fan. Okay. The reason why, Ghost Start, you're saying that Twitter did not show the retweet. Twitter no longer shows retweets on your page. You need to quote tweet it with an actual phrase or with some kind of a word in order for it to be seen on your timeline. They've been doing this not just to you, but to everyone. They made a change to the timelines. And now you can look at reposts when you look at somebody's page, and you'll be able to see what they retweeted. All right. And then finally, there's Aspen's GoFundMe. And then we've got Shanda Masta. Shanda, our sister. I saw Oz posted, it was 2 years ago this week that Shanda was first diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. And here we are 2 years later, and we lost our friend months ago. About cancer. You can go to Indie News Shop, which you can get to by going to IndieNewsNow.com. Click on the shop, and at the top is the Shanda Masta Fuck Cancer collection of t-shirts and merch. Shout out to our brother Oz. I know how much we all miss her. Yeah, thank you, Vicky, for putting up the sunflowers. Because that was her favorite. Is Oz retiring? I don't know what Oz is doing. Yeah, he's taking a break. They also got a puppy, so he's been training a new dog. He did a show with Lily a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what their plans are as far as the next show, if there is another show planned. But again, you can go to this link here that I'm going to drop in the chats for the shop, for the Indie News shop.itemorder.com, or you can get there by going to IndieNewsNow.com. And any profits from this, and the t-shirts again are $20, $23 for black. Profits from this would be donated to cancer. Right now, we've only got 4 things sold. Chris Allegre, thank you. And Oz got a hoodie, and Animairs and Andy, her man, picked up some stuff as well. Thank you. I love you all for doing that. Okay. Wow. This might be a record, fam. Thank you, Kameshwari Kate. I love you. Appreciate all that. And that you hung out all night. See that? I told you it would be the long stream. It might be a record. So, thank you to everyone. I'm giving you my applause. All right. I will see you next Tuesday.
That's what she said.
Ha ha ha. And support independent media because we need it more than ever. I love you all. See you next week, fam. No! We just fucking lost the stream.
Who are these people?
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?